In the 21st year of the Caesario calendar, a horrific disaster befell the kingdom of Granville. The scene was chaotic and blood-soaked, and the survivors began to lose their composure. Faces were filled with panic and fear. Outside, monsters had surrounded the last fortress of humanity. Where the remaining survivors had gathered, the soldiers set reality aside and rallied together with a faint hope. Yet the most terrifying thing had not yet appeared. A howl and the sound of beating wings horrifyingly drew everyone's attention. Before them, countless giant monsters with overwhelming auras were flying in. Then, a massive beast slowly concentrated magical energy in its mouth and launched it straight toward the crowd below. The attack was enough to wipe everything away, including the fortress's sturdy gates, which were crushed to splinters. The monsters outside seized the opportunity and poured in like a storm, weapons brandished as they threatened those inside. Their lives were taken more easily than anyone else's. Those colossal beasts slowly squeezed the tiny lives out of people. An unavoidable fate was closing in right before our eyes. They crept into every corner of the fortress, sending soldiers fleeing in terror. Everywhere were the corpses of soldiers slain by the monsters, yet the creatures continued hunting humans until humanity was eradicated. Amid the smoke and fire, a worried and urgent voice rang out. Nearby lay soldiers who had been fortunate enough to be rescued in time, all grievously wounded, and the uninjured took turns tending to them. One soldier looking quite ill was being treated, and the other's hurried voice sounded again next. That person was Will. He looked at everyone and shouted, "I'll heal him. Bring the wounded here quickly." Another man was brought over. Will quickly knelt and cast a healing spell to treat him. Will kept urging them on before it was too late. A subordinate beside him, seeing this, spoke up to dissuade him. "Lord Will, the gate is about to be breached. Please run." He couldn't help feeling anxious at the imminent danger. It was too dangerous for a top healer like you to be on the front line. Hearing that made Will angry. He turned and barked at him, "Are you telling me to abandon them?" He clenched his teeth, fully aware of the responsibility on his shoulders. As long as he kept healing, he would not let humanity be extinguished. That moment made Will recall his parents' admonitions, their messages about his duty to the world and the power he possessed. They told him everyone's lives depended on him, and that from now on he would be the greatest healer in the world. Suddenly, an urgent call snapped him out of his thoughts. Lord Will. At the gate, two people were looking for him. One loudly called, "Where is Lord Will?" He followed the call and saw a mighty general before him who had had an arm severed, his breath growing weak. Will exclaimed in shock, "General." But he quickly said, "Put him down here." As soon as the general was set down, a soldier urgently asked Will with obvious worry, "Can you save the general?" "Without him, this front will." Faced with the question, Will answered swiftly and resolutely, "I will save him," then crouched and began casting magic. Those around were worried and the tension in the air was palpable, but he spoke with certainty, "For that is why I am here." Will quickly concentrated magic around himself and the general, and a blue magical circle appeared beneath them. Then boom, a pillar of blue light sprang up, astonishing everyone present. That energy enveloped the general's severed arm, gradually restoring it to him. The joints, fingers, and even the flesh that had been bitten away slowly healed. After the arm was restored, the blue light gradually faded. The general slowly opened his eyes and regained consciousness. He sat up with his arm fully healed, and the soldiers nearby cheered without stop. "Truly deserving of Lord Will, the general has awakened." He stared bewildered at the arm that had been severed, now lacking even a single wound. Will smiled in relief and said, "However severe the wounds, I will heal them all. Now surely humanity's victory is right before us." The general did not answer but only stared fixedly at his hand. His pupils twitched. Suddenly he threw a punch straight at Will's face. Will couldn't dodge in time and took the blow. He clenched his restored arm until it went white and annoyed said, "You just performed a useless act." The soldiers there and Will were stunned and confused. After taking the punch, Will held his face and looked at him. "What? Why did you hit me?" A brave soldier spoke up, "General, what the hell are you doing?" But the more they reacted, the angrier he became. He shouted loudly, "Shut your mouth." His hand deftly drew the sword at his hip. Will froze when he saw that motion. The general plunged the sword hard into Will's shoulder, making him cry out in pain. The madness in him and his words terrified Will. His eyes flashed with murderous intent. "This arm, why didn't you let me die?" The general pressed the sword into his shoulder, making him tremble with pain. He shouted, his voice laced with fear and despair, "Someone like you who only stands behind to recover our wounds knows nothing of our pain, of the despair we feel facing those monsters." He glared fiercely at Will, grinding his teeth. "When I thought it was finally over, you restored me. how many more arms must we lose? As he spoke, he pointed toward the soldiers, his voice carrying accusation and exhaustion. Everyone here shared that feeling. They no longer wanted to fight. Only then did Will turn his gaze to the soldiers. His eyes widened in astonishment. Around him were nothing but wounded soldiers, nowhere untouched, some with broken arms, some blind of an eye. Others lay strewn about, exhausted and in pain. Panic and confusion spread across Will's face as he could not help but ponder the general's words. Impossible, I've saved as many as I could. Does he mean everything I've done is meaningless? A painful truth slapped him in the face, rendering physical pain insignificant. When he realized the general's words were true, the sweat, toil, and tears, even the journey to the front lines, all of it. Only then did the general withdraw the sword from Will's shoulder, making him grit his teeth in pain. The general said to him, "Even if you are the greatest healer in the world, I don't care. I've endured enough for you." He turned his back to leave, leaving the words, "In any case, humanity will perish anyway. If you want to fight, go and do it yourself." Will called after him in a fluster, but he seemed to shout, "Healers can't use offensive magic." His voice cracked with fear. "Without you here, this place would." But the general no longer cared for the lives of humanity and simply turned and walked away. At the same time, the dragon outside let out a terrifying roar as a fireball condensed in its mouth. Then with a bang it struck the fortress directly, destroying almost everything. The room where Will was smashed to pieces. The walls collapsed and dust filled the air. The general was pinned under a slab of rock, barely breathing. He weakly tried to crawl away. But then another heavy weight fell on him, causing him to scream in pain. Finally everything exploded. Will opened his eyes and tried to look around. Only then did he realize what had happened. The dragon from before had landed right in front of him, beating its wings and growling viciously. Will clearly saw the creature and belatedly realized that this was the kind of monster the people he had saved had to face. He forced a bitter smile, his eyes full of despair. All this time he had only ever watched from the rear. Will clutched the wound on his shoulder himself, his hand trembling uncontrollably. Damn it, all the effort spent learning healing magic was wasted. Memories surged into his mind, leaving him in turmoil. Even with a natural gift for healing magic, and being hailed as the greatest healer in the world, he gritted his teeth as anger and helplessness rose. He should have been fighting with his own hands. In that moment Will grabbed a nearby stone. Though he knew he couldn't win, he charged forward. Regret filled his heart. If only he could go back to that day. Will rushed at the monster, clutching the small stone with a determined face. Surely I would. But there was no miracle. The dragon moved toward Will. All that remained were the words "if only," and his life was swallowed by it. Those wandering thoughts drifted away, mingling with his chaotic emotions. Suddenly Will opened his eyes again. He sprang up immediately. His eyes scanned the surroundings and a familiar scene struck him, leaving him stunned. He looked toward the desk beside him, the enrollment notice. If this is here, it means. Will couldn't believe his eyes. He hurried outside and before him was a peaceful scene. People were chatting cheerfully. Could this be the day 5 years ago? He stood frozen, stunned, and expressionless. It seemed he had returned to the 16th year of the Cesario calendar. The day when Will, who would later become the greatest healer in the world, looked around in confusion. He should have died by a dragon's hand. It was an academy specialized in training healing magic. 1 week before entering the healing academy, it was the day he held the enrollment letter in his hand. Tiredly he murmured that he still didn't know what had happened. The last fragments of memories from his previous life surfaced like reminders, and if his dying wish had been granted, then he knew exactly what he had to do. He clenched the enrollment notice tightly. Determination filled his face as he said firmly that he would enroll at the Offensive Magic Academy, Schwarz Academy. Will stood in silence thinking, in a world where healers cannot use offensive magic which every mage accepts as obvious, I must break that prejudice. There will certainly be many barriers to overcome. At that moment, the memories from before surfaced in his mind once more. But I still have memories of my previous life along with the supreme healing magics I had mastered then. If I can make full use of them, I can surely change the future. With determination and resolve, he quickly set himself a goal to pursue. His eyes flashed with certainty. By my own strength I will save this world. To begin the plan, the first step Will thought of was school. First, I must enroll at Schwarz Academy, the world's top offensive magic academy. There is much about Schwarz Academy. Schwarz's superior training program is said to be able to turn anyone into a true battle mage. The person I met in my previous life also came from Schwarz. But then he realized their methods were top secret. only by entering could one learn them. The biggest concern for Will was his identity as a healer. He closed his eyes and thought, there's probably never been a healer admitted before, what should I do now? Then suddenly he thought of a plan: money. Schwarz can train anyone into a first-rate offensive mage, and so nobles are said to occasionally use money to buy spots for their worthless children. But that idea was immediately dashed. He'd just been reborn, where would he get so much money? He looked around the room regretfully. If only I had brought money from my past life. Even with humanity doomed, money would have been useless, yet the rewards I earned serving the kingdom back then would have lasted a lifetime. Realizing he was at an impasse made him more anxious. Even if he started working now, he wouldn't make enrollment in time. Think. Suddenly a gentle voice called to him, Will, are you awake yet? A beautiful girl entered and smiled at him, startling him. Sis. He suddenly teared up and found himself looking at her a bit longer. That's right, I've returned to the past. At this time she is still alive. Seeing him like that, she asked in surprise, what's wrong, do you have a stomach ache? Will awkwardly waved his hand and hurriedly explained, no, it's just a bit of dust in my eye. Good morning, sis. She smiled sweetly and replied, good morning. He stared at her for quite a while. A new thought formed: this life I will definitely prevent the tragedy that befell her. With my healing magic I can save those I couldn't before. Suddenly he exclaimed, that's it. Will was so excited he grinned ear to ear, taking her hand and smiling foolishly. Thank you, because of you I figured out a solution. His reaction left her bewildered, asking, what is it, dear? But Will gave no explanation and hurried off, leaving, I'm stepping out for a bit, I'll tell you when I get back. She sighed helplessly, oh dear, remember to come back for dinner. The Alliance of Magic Academies, an organization overseeing the kingdom's magic academies and making all decisions related to magical education. At this time, the Alliance chairman was also serving as the headmaster of Schwarz Academy. However, from some point he no longer appeared at the Alliance, because of... Cut to a vast palace. Moonlight poured in. Ulnuram sat beside Marie's bed. Her face was flushed from fever. He reached out and touched Marie's uncomfortable face. His gaze held worry and gentleness. Marie. He is the chairman of the Alliance of Magic Academies and headmaster of Schwarz Academy, Ulnuram Goldgren. Ulnuram's eyes turned sorrowful and bitter. I'm sorry, the healers today lack the skill, but I will find someone who can cure you, so please endure a little longer. At that time the chairman always stayed at his side, caring for his gravely ill niece. Yet the healing magic of that era was unable to cure her. He sat by Marie's bed sobbing, and then the little girl passed away. But that's a story from my previous life, leave it to me. Will jumped onto the windowsill and said, I'll handle it, okay. Looking at the unfamiliar young man, he wondered, you are. Ulnuram immediately recognized him. If I remember correctly, you're Will, the scholarship student from the Healing Academy, right? You jumped in through the window, so you know of me. He raised his hand and began to explain, your talent for healing magic is already famed throughout the Alliance. I didn't expect you'd be the type to climb in through a window. He scratched his head at that, embarrassed, thinking to himself that his past self would never have done such a thing. Maybe having died once made him bolder. Will got straight to the point. There's no more time for her or for me. He reached toward Marie with great confidence. I can cure her. Ulnuram looked at him with suspicion and caution. What are you plotting? He pleaded anxiously. Leave that for later. First, please allow me to treat her. The illness has progressed more than I thought. His eyes were filled with worry and determination as he faced Ulnuram's scrutinizing gaze. He agreed, which made Will breathe a sigh of relief. Very well, let's see what you can do. The two of them sat facing each other beside Marie's bed. Will's face was a little tense as he looked across at her. Ulnuram was watching him with extreme scrutiny. His gaze was truly intimidating, as if he were ready to send him off at the slightest mistake. The caliber of a headmaster of a combat magic academy was evident. Will took a deep breath to regain his composure. He slowly took Marie's hand very carefully. A stream of healing light radiated, filling the entire room. Will concentrated on casting the spell, thinking that his mana had diminished since returning, but he still remembered the healing formulas clearly. Seeing Marie's condition gradually improve, the formula to treat Zora's disease for this child would not be invented for another 2 years. But with his current ability. She slowly, quietly opened her eyes. Will exhaled a breath of relief. Thank goodness. He broke into a radiant smile. You're all right now. Seeing his handsome face, she blushed involuntarily, though you're still weak, so rest a while. She turned away bashfully and replied, yes, sir. Ulnaram asked worriedly, Marie, are you truly feeling well? Marie smiled happily and replied, yes, sir, I can't remember how many years it's been since I felt this healthy. His eyes glistened with tears as he looked at her with love. He leaned over and stroked her head. I understand. Moonlight streamed through the window. How fortunate. Cut to the living room. Ulnaram was seated in conversation. Thank you, Will. If there is anything I can do, I will help wholeheartedly, he said without hesitation. Thank you very much. This is not a request, sir. He made his request. As you can see, my healing magic has reached a supreme level now. There is nothing more for me to learn in that field. With his hand on his chest, he answered clearly. Therefore, please allow me to enroll at Schwarz Academy. He looked a bit troubled and asked, you want to enter the Offensive Magic Academy instead of using your healing talent? Do you understand what that means? He replied with absolute determination, of course I understand. Ulnaram stared into Will's eyes full of longing, those eyes. He suddenly stood up, surprising Will. Perhaps my authority exists for this very day. Looking at Will's determined face, he spoke, I will make it a reality. They both rose and shook hands. I approve your enrollment. Will gripped his hand tightly, utterly resolute. Cut to a room where a man muttered to himself, that damn crafty old fox, thought he'd just returned quietly, but instead he pulls a stunt like this. He held up a paper, a healer claiming he can keep up with Schwarz's curriculum, that pampered kind of healer. That paper was Will's enrollment form. On opening day, scores of students stood in the schoolyard. On the podium stood Ulnaram with a stern expression. At Schwarz Academy, a unique boarding school specializing in offensive magic, with a vast campus and countless training areas, laboratories, and even a gigantic library. Alumni wielded influence outside the academy and received full support from the kingdom. There's no better environment to learn offensive magic. Since no healer has ever enrolled before, countless difficulties surely await him, but studying here gave Will hope. He smiled, thinking he could become a battle mage too. The faces of friends and comrades, memories from his previous life surfaced, and finally his own face right here in this place. Now his life began a new chapter, his destiny. After enrollment during class, Will's face was full of grimaces, completely different from his earlier bright expression. The professor standing beside him called out, begin. He raised his hand toward the scarecrow. A magic circle appeared in his palm, and flames welled up accordingly. Feeling as if the mana had coalesced, Will shouted loudly. But the fire did not shoot forth as expected. Only smoke swirled around his palm. Contrary to the students' jeers, the professor calmly remarked, you failed again today. Then he sternly issued a punishment. Until you can shatter that target with a basic offensive spell, you won't enter the class. Go practice in the training yard behind the building. Hearing this, Will protested loudly, sir, can't you teach me the proper way? At this rate, I don't even know how to train. The man pushed up his glasses and said coldly, teaching a healer is just a waste of time. Still, Will did not give up and suggested, at least let me study theory in the library. The other maintained an indifferent attitude and replied, there are no books here for the healer class. Disobey and you'll be punished. While the two were arguing, someone summoned a fire spell and grinned, but that guy hurled the flame at Will's back. Move aside, watch out. He fell face first to the ground. He tried to lift his trembling body and asked, what the hell was that? In return, he received the attacker's contempt. Couldn't even dodge that. Ulp smiled coldly and offered a lesson. This is an academy for offensive magic. There's no room for those too weak to defend themselves. He sneered, looking down. In other words, getting hit is your own fault. Will was momentarily stunned. The professor sneered and continued. Ulp said, that's right. Wouldn't it be better if you shove off to the Healing Magic Academy? Seeing him agree, Ulps grew even more brazen. Go there and let those gentle healers comfort you. Amid his mocking laughter, Will fell silent and frowned in irritation. Late that night on the training grounds, Will sat on a bench and sighed heavily. He looked up and muttered to himself that there was no sign he could learn offensive magic at all. Will wasn't too surprised by the situation. He knew it would be difficult. The reason is that healing and offensive magic draw on different sources of power. Magic transmutes mana, the user's spirit is channeled through formulas to activate spells, and the nature of mana is determined by the caster's state of mind. Offensive magic uses active mana to produce fire or explosions, whereas healers only possess passive mana and cannot use those techniques. But Schwarz has methods to train top offensive mages from scratch, and among those methods there must be a way to cultivate active mana. I'm fairly confident in my mana control, so if I learned that technique I assumed I could convert passive mana into active mana, but recalling this afternoon left him somewhat helpless. He hadn't even been allowed into class. Do all the students and teachers despise healers this much? Then he sprang up, exclaiming that he couldn't give up. The image of that girl flashed through his mind. She said her mana was scarce at first, but she honed it at Schwarz. Choosing Schwarz was definitely the right move. Will put his hand to his chin and devised a plan. Blindly rushing in wouldn't help. Since I'm not allowed in the library, maybe I should sneak in. Suddenly someone shouted, "Hey kid, what are you doing here at this hour?" which startled him. He hurriedly said, "I'm sorry." Will awkwardly rubbed his head and turned around. His eyes widened in astonishment. A breeze swept by. The sound of footsteps echoed in the silent air. Green eyes peeked out from behind white hair. At last her appearance was revealed under the moonlight. He stood there dazed and called Veronica. Why did he know her? Because in his previous life he fought shoulder to shoulder with Veronica on the battlefield. She had been a top offensive mage, and in the end the two had parted ways in a painful manner. Will felt secretly delighted. He hadn't expected to meet her again in this life. It was nostalgic. Her spectral sword could slice anything in an instant. Just then he panicked and shouted because of the situation. "Wait, she's drawing her sword." Hearing that, Veronica naturally replied that there was a suspicious student here, so of course she had to be vigilant. She began to question him. "What are you doing, trying to cause trouble or just practicing?" In Will's mind he judged that she was nothing like the bullies. He absolutely could not be struck, so he hastily waved his hand. "I'm just practicing." Veronica then sheathed her sword and said, "Good then." They conversed back and forth. "You're Veronica, right?" "Yes, it's me, but," she warned, "do you always address your teacher so plainly?" He instinctively apologized before realizing and said, "Sorry, teacher." So, in my previous life she wasn't much older than me either. Seeing the other's puzzled expression, Veronica had to explain, "I skipped grades and became a teacher right after, starting this year." Will scratched his cheek and replied, "I understand," while thinking inwardly that Veronica is so young given her talent as a professor. It's not surprising. Determination flashed in his eyes. This was his chance. Because Will wanted to ask her for help, she might teach him offensive magic. But he wasn't sure whether this plan would succeed. He bluntly stated his request. "I want to enroll in your class, Professor Veronica. What must I do to participate?" Veronica put a hand to her chest and politely declined. "I'm sorry, but I haven't been assigned to teach any classes yet. I keep skipping grades, so I rarely take regular classes. This year I'm working as a teaching assistant to answer students' questions. They think peers will be more approachable, but," she added that she was puzzled no one came to ask her anything, which made Will awkwardly let it pass. He understood why. They were afraid any slip and she'd draw her sword. But that made it an even better opportunity. He could freely ask Veronica to teach him. Thinking that, Will felt more motivated. "May I ask you something?" Veronica calmly agreed, "Sure, it's part of my job." He asked seriously, "I'll be direct. What does a healer need to do to master offensive magic?" She fell silent as if pondering the answer. Her gaze suddenly flashed sharp. "I also sense something unusual in your mana flow." "So you're the freshman everyone's been talking about." Will was surprised that someone like Veronica knew of him. "You know about me? It's rare for a healer to study offensive magic. I've never heard of such a case." He returned to the main point. "I've heard Schwarz has a method to refine active mana from nothing, if that method truly exists. Then even I could use active mana." Veronica turned and delivered the good news. "That method does exist and I can teach you." Will brightened really then, but she continued however. Veronica had to explain more clearly. "It's still impossible for you to use offensive magic. The amount of passive mana in your body is already too great. At that scale, even if you refined active mana, it would be dissolved into that mass of passive mana. Even if you found another way to refine active mana when mixed with passive mana, offensive spell formulas couldn't function normally." He couldn't accept it and asked further, "Impossible, there's no way for a healer to use offensive magic?" The answer he received was, "Not as far as I know." Having such a promising option eliminated left him in a terrible mood. "Damn it, my plan's ruined, but I can't give up here. If there's no way, I'll make one." Then he forced a calm smile to say goodbye. "Thank you very much, I'll think more about this myself." But as he turned to leave, she unexpectedly spoke up. "Wait, I'm not finished. It's true healers can't use offensive magic, but there is still a way for a healer to become an offensive mage. Will was puzzled and asked outright, "Sorry, what do you mean?" Veronica gave an example. "This is an iron sword. If you swing it, you can cut down and defeat an enemy." Her hand swept along the back of the chair. Then she suddenly offered another example, "And this is a wooden chair. Sit on it." Though he didn't quite understand, he replied yes. Unexpectedly, Veronica effortlessly lifted the chair, and even that chair, if you swung it and used it to strike, could knock someone down, making Will shudder inwardly that with her thin arm like that. After setting the chair down, she continued teaching, "You didn't think to use it that way because it was made for another purpose, but you have the freedom to use it however you want. These hands are the same." Veronica gently stroked his flushed face. "I can pat your head softly like this." Her finger lightly teased his lip, and then snapped her finger firmly against his forehead. "Or I could hurt you." Seeing Will react so strongly, she asked apologetically, "Was I too rough?" He replied in pain, "It's okay. In the end, the point is how you use it. Anything can become a weapon depending on how you wield it." Will seemed to realize something. "Could you use healing magic to attack?" She nodded, pleased at how quickly he understood. "When a student asks, the teacher answers." "Strange, why hadn't you thought of that until I mentioned it?" "It's due to differences in thinking and innate mana composition. That's why offensive mages aren't keen on healing magic, and vice versa. But you might be different." Your Chinese letter enrollment in the Offensive Magic Academy already proves you're an exception. In fact, your mana isn't like that of a pure healer. Hearing that, he looked at his palm in thought, not like it. He hadn't noticed either. Could it be because he had reverted? She drew her sword and placed it at Will's throat. "You need to reassess it." Veronica's words carried seriousness, the fierce desire to fight within him. "If you can achieve that, your healing magic will surely crush any enemy." After an evening of teaching like that, time passed, and the next day, standing on the training grounds, he couldn't help but recall what Veronica had said last night. Her way of giving examples was truly unique. He felt enlightened. But why did Veronica have no prejudice against healers? It's strange that she has a doctrine linking healing and offensive magic, as if. Suddenly, the professor called out that nickname, the healer, which made Will snort inwardly. They won't even use his name now. He looked at the roster and said, "In today's class we'll have one-on-one sparring. Since the class has an odd number, you'll participate." He could only listen helplessly. "Your inability to use offensive magic is your problem. Whatever happens is on you." The professor's lips curled into a sly smile. "I've finished pairing you up. Your match is against Ulps." Hearing that guy's delighted laughter, Will refused to get angry. Such blatant stacking. A sharp glint flashed in his eyes. He looked at his opponent. Ulp's Omen, rumored scion of a prestigious noble family, always surrounded by followers. From what he saw in class, the guy had the strength of a real offensive mage, not just relying on family. Ulp sneered with contempt. "Healing magic won't heal humiliation, right? After I beat you to a pulp, you gonna go home and cry to your mom." Facing such cruel words, Will couldn't help but be angry. The corner of his mouth twitched that attitude. If it were his previous life, he probably wouldn't care much, but he had to admit this kind of behavior really rubbed him the wrong way. He also wanted to test Veronica's hypothesis from yesterday and figured he'd respond a bit. Thinking that, he raised his hand and called out, "Professor." "What?" The professor assumed he wouldn't accept giving up. In a slightly amused tone, "Give up? No way, I only have a small proposal." Thinking to himself, "I get it. I don't lean toward offensive magic, just as you said. Continuing like this is a waste of time, so if I lose this match, Will said something shocking. I'll quit Schwarz." The professor showed no surprise. Instead, he praised the choice as wise. "But I haven't finished. In return, if you win, I'll allow you to join the regular class." The cheerful mood he had moments ago vanished. "Don't get delusional." But Ulps laughed with great delight and agreed. "Fine, a weakling challenging the strong must cling to fanciful illusions to comfort himself facing fear. This frail kid probably needs that. Besides, it's no fun if there's nothing to crush." With no other choice, the professor had to accept Will's proposal. Arguing about such unrealistic hypotheses would be a waste of time. Fine. He raised both hands and shouted to both sides, "Take your positions." Then he raised his hand to signal the match to begin. Ulps radiated a wave of mana. When the magic circle appeared, the daggers materialized alongside it. He was extremely proud of this technique. Watch closely, this is my creation magic, countless blades I produce will skewer people. Shouting, Ulps hurled a dagger, one flew off. If you can't even use basic offensive magic, what good are you? Faced with the approaching danger, Will calmly pressed his fingertips together. A magic circle appeared between his hands. His eyes also took on a blue tint. Will calmly dodged the incoming daggers. Seeing his opponent dodge so smoothly, Ulps couldn't believe it. What? The essence of my healing magic is manipulating life. I regulate a target's vital functions, then heal by maximizing their recovery potential. But recovery isn't the only thing I can manipulate. If I convert it into an offensive form. He assumed Will dodged by luck and was already smug. Will didn't bother to retort. He silently adjusted his mana, enhancing his physical strength. His hand caught a dagger flying nearby. Then he used magic to alter their flight paths. One by one, the daggers fell to the ground under the changed forces. But one dagger remained in Will's hand, perfect timing. The blade flashed in the sunlight. His expression was extremely confident. Borrow this for a moment. The sudden reversal surprised everyone. What just happened? Is that offensive magic? I thought he only knew healing magic. Will corrected himself inwardly. It's not offensive magic, he's using healing magic to attack. It seems no one can tell the difference. The most upset person now was Ulps. He summoned more daggers, claiming he had held back before and could increase the number. No way a offensive mage would lose to a healer. He easily used the dagger to block the other incoming blades. The blades were completely shattered. Ulps grew increasingly unhinged. And it wasn't just about quantity. The blade now transformed into a gigantic sword, swelling in size. Seeing that, Will calmly assessed, he's strong too, his aptitude for understanding innate magic is high. He even added another technique, now he'll add a spinning effect. Ulps was supremely confident in this move. What do you think with this technique? But Will merely held up his small saber to block the tip of the giant spinning sword. This scene was utterly unbelievable to him. Ulps ground his teeth, gnashing angrily. He forced his mana into the sword with all his might. Will thought he should probably boost his physical enhancements a bit more. As soon as he decided that, he sliced and sent the giant sword flying straight into the sky. The sword struck the ground and Ulps cried out in disbelief, impossible. In an instant, Will appeared right behind him, smiling. I'll treat you properly, so forgive me, okay? The sword's tip flashed as sunlight hit it, but something suddenly blocked his view and someone shouted, that's enough. Will hastily stepped back. Ulps was so terrified he collapsed onto the ground. A massive boulder had suddenly appeared in the training yard. The professor's voice trembled slightly, and the next match both of you stopped. The two of them stared at each other. Then Will cheerfully repeated the condition from earlier. So I can join regular classes from now on, right? He was indeed extremely displeased. He snorted coldly, do as you wish. Having achieved his goal, Will beamed a bright smile. Thank you very much, Professor. And with that he left the lesson. Excuse me, I'll be going first. Walking off in some direction, Will pondered the feeling from a moment ago. This is my own style of offensive magic. It's much more effective than I thought. I defeated a skilled offensive mage of my cohort. Thanks to Professor Veronica, I can use healing magic to attack. At last my plan has succeeded. The school's emblematic flag fluttered in the wind. Across the way, Ulps tried to restrain his anger and said, Professor, it was just an accident during class, it's nothing. Also, I don't want every little thing reported to my father. The professor had nothing more to say. Ulps. A vicious gleam flashed in his eyes. You know what I'm implying, Professor. He habitually pushed his glasses up. Of course I understand. The corner of his mouth lifted into a sly smile. We can't let a healer get cocky. In a classroom with a fair number of students, Will felt a bit nervous and thoughtful. Finally, I'm in class. I'll learn everything about offensive magic. The moment the door opened, it drew the attention of many students. The person who entered was quite familiar. He glanced up briefly and then left immediately. The professor stepped onto the podium and began, all right, let's start the magic tool making class. Since you're new, the content is still basic and the homeroom teacher will handle multiple subjects at once. Today's lecture is magic tool making again. There's something similar at the Healing Magic Academy. He paused and smiled to himself, how nostalgic. As he spoke, he drew on the board for clarity. Today we'll craft an ice bomb. I'll distribute the materials. Assemble them step by step and remember to infuse them with mana. In my previous life I only made healing items like potions. Attacking magic academies are different, all weapons. They probably expect me to actively use mana, but mana's nature isn't crucial in tool making. Most functions rely on the materials. Thinking that, Will opened his bag, so I can still learn this lesson after all. Inside were two items. A shard of ice golem eye and powder from a fire branch. He tried opening the book to check the info. Let's see, mix the fire branch powder with the ice golem ice shard. Suddenly the ice golem shard emitted a strange aura of mana. That immediately caught Will's attention. Without a moment's hesitation, he sprang up and used a technique. He enhanced his body to throw the shard away. An explosion occurred right in class, and a huge block of ice formed on the wall. The earlier panic gradually subsided. The professor's shout rang out, "Hey you there, what the hell are you doing?" Will tried to calm down and explain. No, it activated itself before I could infuse mana. But of course he wouldn't forgive him. No explanations, I'll deduct points. Suddenly a sound came from behind. He turned and saw Ulp's group laughing mockingly. It seemed they had sensed something off here. Then came the next lesson. On the desk was a beast caged inside, a mysterious creature class, a salamander. The creature and the person stared at each other. Only Will sat alone at a front row desk. The low scorers are pushed to the front, focus. He froze at the thought of being so close to a salamander. It seemed to be trembling violently. Suddenly the salamander spat fire at the opponent, but Will had anticipated it and used a pan to shield himself. The perplexed professor asked why he brought a pan. Will replied confidently, "I thought I might need it." But when the professor stepped forward to confiscate it, as the caged beast edged closer, Will tried to lean back and inwardly realized, so that's how it is. They allowed me into class but had no intention of letting me study properly. So what should I do now? In the corner of the room, a student sat tensely. She glanced at him with obvious worry. After that, the harassment continued in the training yard. Ulps shot fire toward Will but excused it as a slip of the hand. Next in class, the professor ordered, "Now solve this exercise." He hesitated and replied that he hadn't learned this part yet, and the professor used that to bully him. Falling behind is your fault, points deducted. Even outside class, trash was piled in front of his door. The dorm manager heard about it and stepped in to punish him. Apparently you had a bad attitude in class. The penalty is no dinner, which made Will complain that it was so unfair. At the academy dormitory in Will's room, he wearily lay down on the bed. Everyone at the academy is hostile toward me. I met so many obstacles in just the first few days, and there are still mountains of challenges ahead. Will raised his hand resolutely and thought, "I'm making progress step by step. I can't let this bullying crush my spirit." Images of that match resurfaced. And besides, it was the first time I fought with my own hands and won. A hope always remained in his heart. I can become an offensive mage. After cheering himself on, Will sat up to study, finally a textbook. I'll review today's lesson a bit. The next day, the classroom was pitifully empty. He checked the clock again and felt something odd. It's class time, but the teacher still hasn't shown up. In that strange situation, Will instinctively looked around. Besides him, there was only that girl left. It seemed they'd moved the class without bothering to tell us. There was nothing else to do, so he stood up. No point staying here any longer. When he carefully tried to start a conversation, the girl jumped in surprise. Will scratched his cheek and voiced his guess. Maybe the next class changed rooms. Erica looked down and agreed, "I thought so too." Her next remark caught his attention. "Since it's just the two of us here and both teachers and others shun us, I can guess what happened." She gave off a gloomy vibe like fungus growing out of her. "Guess I'm on the same side as you then." Erica's tone was limp. "We're both being pushed aside, so let's be friends." Will was a bit surprised and silently judged this classmate. "She seems gloomy but speaks bluntly." Then he reached out and smiled brightly. "Anyway, I'm really glad to make a new friend. Nice to meet you." She exclaimed that it felt so refreshing. She immediately stood and grabbed his hand. "I really hope you'll help me." It was the girl's turn to introduce herself. "My name is Erica." Will scratched his head and said sheepishly, "Erica is my first friend at this academy." Erica politely waved her hand and replied, "That's understandable, Will. You rarely attend class and above all, you're a healer. Everyone says that healers are just weaklings." Hearing that made him suddenly freeze. She gave a wry laugh. "Well, I attend all my classes and I'm an offensive mage, yet I still don't have any friends." Will pondered the remark, putting her personality aside. The prejudice against healers is deeply ingrained. Frontline offensive mages who win glory tend to look down on healers. In my previous life, I was recognized early as the kingdom's healer, so I never experienced this kind of discrimination. But at an academy focused on offensive magic, that attitude is severe. Studying here means I'll have to fight against that prejudice too. She hesitated a little. Finally she asked, "Why did you come to Schwarz?" Will muttered the question back to himself. "You asked why." The answer had long been decided, so he said plainly without hesitation, "Because I was born a healer and I realized that's no reason to give up." Erica tilted her head as if not fully understanding. He could only force a strained smile and give a vague reply, I have my own reasons. What about you, Erica? Why are you here? Caught off guard, she stumbled in response. Well, I come from a small noble family in the provinces, but because my family has no sons, my parents worry the line will die out. So they think if I make a name for myself as an offensive mage, I could inherit as a female head of the family. That reason isn't hard to understand. I see graduating from Schwarz will definitely help you achieve that. Erica sadly confessed, the problem is I have almost no talent for offensive magic, so I have no friends and classes feel like torture, it's just awful. But then she clapped happily and said, now I have a friend. Though she wore a bright smile, her words weren't cheerful. With Will here, someone even worse off than me, I don't worry anymore even if my grades are poor. Will snorted a remark, wondering why she spoke so gleefully. They continued chatting amiably. If you don't understand something, just ask me, thanks, I know you mean well. Turning, he smiled and said, but things probably won't turn out the way you think, Erica. An ambiguous remark like that confused the naive girl. What do you mean? But Will didn't answer her question. Come on, let's go find the classroom. The two stepped out of the room together. Wait for me. After some searching, they finally entered the correct room. Here it is, finally found it. As soon as they entered, the professor scolded. You're late, when did this class even start? Amid the students' mockery, they both said, sorry, we didn't know the class changed rooms. Of course he wouldn't let that slide, no excuses accepted. Seeming to think of something, the professor's mouth curled slightly. While we're at it, he pointed to a highly complex diagram on the board. Solve this problem. Erica couldn't help feeling upset. This isn't fair. We just arrived, how could we know, especially since Will hasn't attended any classes yet. Will just stared up at the board, saying nothing. The professor added, if you solve it correctly, I'll overlook your lateness. Of course, if you're wrong, you'll lose points. Ulp sat below with his chin in his hand, sneering that at this rate the guy will fail the course soon enough. Unexpectedly, this time Will picked up the chalk. The scratching of chalk on the board echoed through the room. The lines he wrote flowed non-stop, leaving her stunned. Others assumed he was just guessing, pointless they thought. After a while the chalk finally stopped. The solved magic circle glowed with a faint light. Will's voice carried a hint of smugness as he asked, well, Professor. He couldn't believe it and pressed his face close to the board. The professor's eyes widened in astonishment. After checking, he had to say, correct, sit down. Ulps reacted most violently. What? As she sat down, Erica was truly curious. She glanced at the self-satisfied Smelier and asked, Will, how did you solve that? After class, during the break, she moved closer and called, Will. Her curiosity that she'd been holding back was relieved. How did you solve that problem? Will recalled the earlier moment and answered, how I solved it? It looks complicated, but I actually applied an example from the textbook. I read ahead in the textbook myself, you know. Hearing that, Erica's eyes went wide and she shouted, what? She slammed her hand on the table, incredulous as she asked again, you read the textbook by yourself? Seeing her strong reaction made him instinctively shrink back. Well, yeah, it's pretty simple. I only just read it for the first time yesterday. But Schwarz's curriculum really lives up to being the world's top offensive magic academy. The material is comprehensive and effective, systematizing everything from basic to advanced. If you master this, you'll easily surpass the level of a typical offensive mage. Still, without magical talent, even reading it is tough. In my previous life, I was already academically strong, so that mindset plus the knowledge let me pick up offensive magic fairly quickly. Hearing that, a complicated feeling rose in Erica. A healer can do that? Will, who are you really, some former greatest healer in the world? While she trembled with that thought, Will was still nodding at his own studiousness. Offensive magic is really engrossing, so I stayed up late to read ahead. Erica's face drained. The content was terrifyingly difficult and should normally require a teacher's guidance to read. Will, I thought you were a trouble student. With that assumption, she clutched his sleeve and wailed, am I the worst in class? Will I get bullied? Oh God, don't leave me behind. He gently placed a hand on Erica's shoulder to reassure her. It's okay, I'll show you anything you don't understand. Will seemed to emanate a radiant glow as he said, we're friends, right? Hearing that lifted her spirits considerably. Will, thanks. Though he had just spoken sweetly, he thought selfishly, of course I'm not at this school to make friends, but with her help I can accomplish more. Will hesitated and offered a trade. Can you do me a favor? After all, class isn't just theory. Calming down a bit, Erica remembered, next is basic offensive magic class. Images of the training ground resurfaced. Alright, the subject I always fail, the reason I was kicked out of all the classes, she thought. But now you probably can do it, right? You even beat Ulps. He had to be honest, I can't, really, I still can't use basic offensive magic. Hearing that, she grew a little worried and asked, so then? Will clenched his palm and said eagerly, but I have a method. He shifted focus to the person beside him. That's why I need your help. On the training ground, the students stood neatly in line. While standing there, he recalled the basic knowledge he knew. In offensive magic, there are basic spells and individualized spells. Basic offensive spells were created so anyone can use them by analyzing the formula. Learn the formula and you can use it. He pictured Ulps using magic as an example. The kind of magic only a specific person can use is called an individualized spell. Even in Schwarz's curriculum, they separate lessons for basic offensive magic and lessons to train each person's individualized spells. Because the latter has no standardized answers, I can even participate by using healing magic offensively. Lost in thought, the homeroom teacher suddenly stood directly in front of Will. But as for the former, if you can't use basic offensive magic, you'll never pass the class. This time he looked quite confident. Theory seems fine, but practice is another matter. You'll fail this subject if you can't use basic offensive magic. Will didn't argue, he replied calmly, yes sir. The professor led him to the scarecrow target in the distance. The test is as usual, use the basic offensive spell Fireball to create a flame and hit that target. He crossed his arms, mocking and warning at once. I'll say it again, this is the most basic of basics. If you can't do this, I can't let you advance in class or graduate. The professor's eyes narrowed, recalling that sparring match. I'd seen you use healing magic in the practice bout, and I've heard bodies move more fluidly after being healed. But you can't even use a basic offensive spell. As if reading his thoughts, Will curled his lips and said, people useless like you should get out of my class right now. That expression was noticed by the professor. You were smiling just now, weren't you? Red and orange light reflected in his wide, astonished eyes. Because at that moment a flame appeared in his palm. What? How are you using magic? While everyone buzzed about the incident, the one who caused the stir chuckled inwardly. Good, they didn't notice. Backtracking a bit to earlier in class. My plan then was to have Erica create a flame using a basic offensive spell, and then transfer it into the salamander's tail. Somehow you ended up with the salamander's tail. The way the flame appeared was, I hid it in my hand while continuously healing it so the tail wouldn't burn away. They talked about this, but didn't you feel pain? I'm a healer, constant healing makes this nothing. Back to the present, just before casting, I used additional restorative magic to activate the tail's fire sac, making it look like a fireball had been created on the spot. With that in mind, we'll gently launch the flame at the target. The red circle was completely scorched away by the fire. While the professor gaped in astonishment, Will calmly smiled and asked, well, professor. Recalling the moment, he silently confirmed, it's definitely fire, no doubt it's a basic offensive spell. Has that kid really used offensive magic? The professor crossed his arms, feigning composure. You passed, step back. Will obediently nodded, thank you very much, sir. In the crowd, the conspirator who'd been part of the plan was just as surprised as everyone else. One person ground their teeth in frustration that he had successfully summoned the flame. In the classroom, Ulps shouted at the person in front of him. What the hell is going on? The professor propped his hand on his chin and asked in confusion. I want to know that too. Why on earth does that kid suddenly know how to use offensive magic? His attitude was no longer his usual mockery. I don't care about that. Just remembering that irritating smile made Ulps furious again. How dare he defy me, and he's a healer to boot. I can't stand being in the same class with him. If I tell my father, he could even disband this class. Hearing that, he hurriedly snapped back to himself and said, wait a moment. He turned away and left the matter to the other. Then do whatever you want, just make him disappear from my sight. And so the unpleasant conversation ended, leaving the professor bewildered, unsure what to do. Being caught doing something out of class is a big risk. This isn't like bullying some noble students. Do you know what I had to do to become a teacher at this academy? But I have to accept the risk to protect this position. A healer who dares to act superior, who knows what the other teachers will say? I won't let a 15-year-old healer ruin my life. This time he had to devise a meticulous plan. There was no other choice, I must handle this myself. At the training ground after class, Will asked the man in front of him in puzzlement, is there something wrong, sir? Why did you call me out here? The professor didn't answer but instead sneered, you seem a bit overconfident lately. He laughed and rubbed his head in reply, thanks to you too, sir, only to receive the other's contempt. Idiot, I wasn't praising you. He brought up past incidents and began to act arrogant. But what about this? You've skipped quite a few of my classes since enrollment. How do you intend to make up for that? A drop of sweat rolled down Will's helpless face. I was about to ask whose fault that was. Still, he obediently gave a conciliatory answer. I borrowed a friend's materials and studied them on my own, so there shouldn't be a problem, sir. The professor dismissed that excuse with an irritating rationale. That's not up to you to decide, absences must be made up. He pushed his glasses up instinctively. The supervising teacher will decide the content. And the makeup session's content is that you'll spar with me. Hearing that, Will was taken aback. A spar between teacher and student. The winning condition sounded easy. Yes, of course I'll go easy on you. Given the gap in ability, if you land a single hit on me, I'll pass you. With such generous terms, you don't intend to run, do you? As expected, he didn't answer immediately. Seeing his opponent deep in thought, he arrogantly thought to himself that your attacks won't reach me anytime soon. Wait until I give you a beating so you understand the difference in strength, then you'll learn to obey. After some thought, Will decided and replied, I understand very well. At that, a vicious look appeared on the professor's face. Perhaps immediately after speaking, he cast a magic circle at once. Then let's begin right now. Will remembered the massive slab of earth. I'd seen his magic once before, it's earth manipulation. The ground ahead trembled violently. Will quickly sprang backward to dodge too fast. Suddenly he noticed something in the rock. Another stone immediately protruded, making evasion extremely difficult. Once again when he looked up, Will gaped in astonishment. A huge column of stone crashed down where he had just stood. The professor struck without hesitation and snorted, "What's the matter, just dodging?" Taking advantage of a moment to rest, Will judged that unlike crafted magic, the professor was using the existing ground, so the attack speed was extreme. Moreover, the attack trajectories were very flexible. He's definitely on a completely different level from Ulp's. His legs sprang up to jump again, but he was fairly confident in his speed. After all, it still wasn't so fast that he couldn't dodge. In an instant, the distance between them closed. The magic circle beneath lit up again. In a flash, two large boulders materialized right beside Will. Then they slammed together with no gap at all. The one who made such a brutal move smiled. But things didn't go the professor's way. Will had a knife in his hand from above. The hand holding the knife swung quickly backward. Unexpectedly, the professor's entire body was shielded by stone. The blade couldn't move an inch, it was rock solid. This method was ineffective. Will clicked his tongue and stepped back. From within the rock, the professor sneered, pathetic. At that level, don't even dream of breaking my crystallized earthen armor. In this situation, he couldn't help but spit out, that name sounds fancy, doesn't it? This time he hurled cruel words. I've never heard of anyone using restorative magic to attack. What a half-baked mimic. Calling weak, sloppy magic an offensive mage's tool is ridiculous. Will wasn't angry, he only sighed and said, Professor, thanks to restorative magic, I've studied the human body very thoroughly. I realized that normally people always restrain their own strength. Because the body can't withstand the full force of itself, if you force an over-limit release, the body will shatter. The professor jeered in confusion. What is this, going to lecture me? Since offensive spells don't work, you plan to run away with fancy talk? He raised a hand and laughed. Wait a moment. He rolled up his sleeve to reveal some muscle. So even if you break your limits to unleash more power, this body still won't remain intact. A stream of mana flowed from Will's palm. But I'm a healer, so even if my hand breaks, it's fine. He seemed to realize something. As he spoke, he stepped closer. Of course, I don't like pain, but it heals right away. Though rather panicked, the professor still thought it foolish. How could that trick break my crystallized earthen armor? Will calmly replied, try it and see. A crazed smile appeared on the young man's composed face. He could only gape, unable to dodge in time. The punch swung violently down at the professor's solid face. The stone shattered, revealing his bloodied face. He calmly smiled and offered a warning. Arbitrarily deciding a student's limits isn't a good idea, you know. Will had learned a new lesson. Since Professor Veronica suggested using restorative magic offensively, he'd realized there's nothing more foolish than assuming something is impossible. I'm certain I'll become much stronger than this. Suddenly he sensed something approaching. As he dodged to the side, a column of stone that had risen shot straight forward. It seemed the earlier punch hadn't knocked the man out. The professor was now furious. Seeing him trembling as he struggled to stand, Will found it a bit funny and reminded him, "Hey, you said one hit and I'd pass." But the professor indignantly snapped back, "Shut up, there's no witness here." A magic circle appeared on the ground again, forcing one to admit being struck by a healer. The earth heaved up into jagged rocks. "I will never accept that." Faced with the situation, Will only sighed in exasperation. Releasing limits isn't just about punching. A surge of mana welled up from the soles of his feet. Instantly, Will moved right in front of his opponent. He stood there dumbfounded, mouth agape, too fast. He could only watch as the other raised his fist again. The earthen armor couldn't form in time. The professor couldn't dodge. He squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the blow. But nothing was felt. After a long wait, he hesitantly opened his eyes. He saw the punch halted right in front of his face. What it stopped. Then he too realized the strange situation. He couldn't move either. No sooner had he thought that than the punch struck his face again, and the professor realized, no, is time slowing down. He couldn't utter a word, only begged inwardly, "Please stop." The professor's face contorted. This pain was relentless. How many times worse did it feel than a normal punch? "It hasn't even finished yet. I can't take it anymore, but I can't flee, nor can I scream to relieve the pain." In that moment his plea seemed to echo aloud, "Please end this." As if hearing his inner voice, time instantly returned to normal. His whole body collapsed to the ground. The one responsible wore a gentle smile. "Glad you're back on my end. That was only a blink." Hearing that, the professor sat up and shouted, "What is this? What did you do?" Will waved his hand to answer the question. "It's not what you think, Professor. I'll explain everything thoroughly. This is what happened. The moment the fist made contact, I cast a spell to heighten your senses. Originally, it's a spell to treat people with impaired hearing or sight. Lately, I've been using it to speed up my reflexes, but I cast it on you at a level beyond the limit. As a result, your senses became abnormally acute, making 1 second feel like 1,000. How painful it would be to be punched in that state. You're probably the best person to understand that." Though smiling, he radiated an extremely fearsome aura. "Also, I have one question. Did I pass the test?" He clicked his tongue irritably. "Fine, but Will wasn't finished. There's one more thing." His hand tightened on the other's shoulder. "Perhaps the ingrained habit of discrimination in you is hard to erase, but if you dare block my way again." With a deadly aura pouring off him, "I'll make you taste pain so the memory is engraved in your body." The threat made the professor tremble with fear. "I just want to study in peace, and of course I don't want to be bothered by other students." Then he feigned normalcy. Will spoke extremely politely. "You'll grant my request, won't you, Professor?" Time passed like that, as the sunset light fell over the academy. Walking down the corridor, he couldn't help wondering what on earth was wrong with that name. "I always assumed all healers lacked combat ability and were a weak bunch with no fighting spirit. Everyone says they must submit to our offensive mages. But he's completely different. Not only does he have formidable real combat ability, his will is so strong it radiates a killing intent." What a coincidence. Ulp showed up at just the right moment. He looked extremely pleased as he asked, "Professor, has he finished the test?" Then he snickered, thinking the fellow was now even closer to the expulsion door. But suddenly the professor shouted an order, "Shut up." He pressed his face close and warned, "Don't you dare touch him again. I'm telling you for your own good. If you think of him as a normal healer, you'd be completely wrong." Ulps, unsurprisingly, didn't believe it. He frowned and retorted, "That's not what I want to hear. Has the professor forgotten? If I tell my father?" That familiar line no longer frightened the professor. "Then go ahead and do it." In his bewilderment, the professor continued, "Oh, and now that I remember, if you can really do that, why aim at me? Why not just kick him out instead?" Before leaving, he dropped a hint. "If your family acts on your words, there's a good chance he'll quietly come back later and bite us." The empty corridor now held only Ulps. His fist slammed hard into the nearby wall. A curse spat from between his teeth. "Damn you." The next day after class, the book was closed. Will stretched to feel comfortable, so peaceful. Why the situation turned out like this he could already guess. It seemed the professor had indeed warned Ulps properly. Occasionally, he still shot him a spiteful glare but didn't dare do anything more. Erica came over to ask about the assignment while Will was thinking, which helped him focus on studying, but it still wasn't enough. That bloody scene came back to him. "If I want to change that doomed future for humanity, I need to become stronger." But outwardly, he calmly taught her, "The idea of using restorative magic to enhance is good, though what I'm doing is simply punching and kicking with everything I've got." After he finished teaching, Erica left satisfied, leaving Will alone. The sensory enhancement is only useful for intimidation. Compared to the variety of offensive spells, I'm still far behind. I need to come up with new combat methods. He carefully asked the person before him, is that what you're thinking? What do you think, miss? Once again Veronica appeared and met Will, Professor Veronica. Veronica closed her eyes and spoke in a cold voice. I wanted to say something earlier, Will replied reluctantly and dejectedly, yes. She folded her arms and smiled approvingly. Well done, Will. He expected to be scolded but was surprised to hear her say that. You're the talk among the faculty. A healer who can keep up with Schwartz's lessons is truly a notable achievement. Veronica then turned toward the other teachers. Most of the staff seemed displeased about this. Will gave a helpless smile. I see. He asked suspiciously, are you hiding the fact that you gave me that advice, Professor Veronica? Veronica answered immediately, not exactly hiding, it's just that I don't usually talk with the other teachers. There simply wasn't an opportunity to mention it. Will recalled her sitting alone in a corner without speaking. Professor Veronica is isolated even among the faculty. He awkwardly scratched his head to cover it up. I'm glad it's like that. It's all thanks to your advice, Professor. I'd feel bad if your position were affected because of this. Veronica spun around to leave. I don't care, so don't worry. Besides, I'm the one who should be grateful. Will asked suspiciously, you're grateful to me, Professor? She turned back to answer him. As I said, with a healer's mindset, they would never think to apply that theory in practice. Veronica slowly drew the sword strapped to her back. Veronica swung the sword with a grave expression. I've been curious to see what a healer fighting in the field looks like. Will began to feel flustered and panicked. Professor, what are you going to do? She raised the sword into an attacking stance. I want to test your current level. Didn't you say you wanted to know how to get stronger? Hearing that, he hastily waved his hands to refuse. Wait, facing Professor Veronica. Veronica interrupted him. On the battlefield, there is no room for pausing. She launched herself forward with a powerful jump. Will's face was a mix of panic and horror. He was at a loss for what to do. He raised his short glaive to block Veronica's attack. Will gritted his teeth and tried to parry with a small sword. Veronica poured her strength into a heavy downward slash, but he quickly dodged the blade. Clenching his teeth while defending, Will thought to himself that even with reflex-boosting magic he had barely kept up. He looked at her as she kept swinging the sword at him. At this pace, Professor Veronica was more than just fast. Every movement was refined to the maximum to unleash consecutive strikes. Will staggered back, breathing heavily and exhausted. Relying only on physical enhancement to keep up would eventually hit a limit. He summoned his strength and lunged at Veronica again, using a single opportunity of speed he had never revealed before. Will drove his rear foot hard into the ground, generating a massive force that sank the earth. He had to catch her off guard. Will unleashed his full speed and charged during her momentary opening. In an instant, the sharp tip of his blade thrust straight toward Veronica's face. He tightened his grip on the sword. A surge of power emanated from the blade. Veronica tilted and brought her sword down in a powerful cut that stunned Will. His eyes narrowed. There was fear, admiration, and astonishment. The tip of his small sword was sliced off and clattered to the ground. Will stood there dazed, giving an awkward, embarrassed chuckle. Veronica quickly sheathed her sword at her hip. She propped her chin and marveled that he had forced her to use a magic blade. Will looked at her helplessly, wondering why her face remained so composed. Veronica leaned on her hip and sighed. I thought your skill only matched a healer who could fight like an offensive spell, but in fact your ability ranks among the top of the offensive spell users in your cohort. Will stammered in reply, thank you very much, but this is still not enough. Veronica folded her arms, eyes full of expectation. I like ambitious people like you. Just enhancing your body isn't satisfying enough, is it? Will picked up his broken sword and looked at it, then said, yes. No matter how far I push my body's limits, what I can do remains limited. Veronica countered with folded arms. A sword isn't just for slashing, you can also stab or throw it. There must be other ways to use restorative magic besides physical enhancement. He scratched his head sheepishly. I've thought of many methods, but none seem truly viable yet. She raised a hand and pointed to her temple. Perhaps you lack real combat experience. Ideas need practical trials to take shape. Knowledge is important, but the concepts born from real encounters are what you need. Didn't you learn anything from that fight just now? Her words made Will recall it. She was right. He asked humbly for instruction. Should I continue sparring with you, Professor Veronica? Veronica replied, "That's not bad, but there's an upcoming field training session for monster eradication." Will was astonished and repeated, "Field training?" He thought to himself that this had happened in his previous life too, the joint monster eradication drill of the three academies. Schwarz Academy of Offensive Magic, Heilig Academy of Restorative Magic, Silbern School of Swordsmanship. Students from each school form teams and carry out real monster hunting assignments. Back at Heilig I didn't participate, but Will remembered the images of those monsters. In this life he would slay them and change that doomed future. He clenched his fist with firm resolve, "I will for sure." Veronica stared at his posture for a moment in silence. Her gaze darkened as she said, "If you want to participate, you'll have to prove your ability through the Academy selection exam. I heard there's a first-year student this year who's been called a genius. Your goal should be to take the top spot among your classmates." Will asked curiously, "How does that field training selection test work?" Veronica didn't hesitate and answered at once, "The candidates fight each other directly." She began to explain, "Each year about 100 people apply and only a few who actually demonstrate real ability are chosen." Will thought to himself that this school really seems to value combat above all else. Will put his hand to his chin and fell into thought. "I remember at Heilig so few signed up that anyone who wanted to could join. This initiative must be Schwarz's style." He recalled memories from his previous life. Heilig, what nostalgia. I wonder what my master is doing now. Veronica reminded him, "By the way, I heard that so-called genius even outclassed some teachers. Taking first won't be easy." Will felt inwardly thrilled, much better than that old homeroom teacher, right? Will asked eagerly, "Has the professor met that student yet?" Veronica sighed with regret, "I hear another teacher is already in charge of him, so he never came to me for advice." Will smiled awkwardly and thought to himself that wasn't the only reason. Other students also don't dare approach her. She placed a determined hand on her chest. "Certainly, don't worry, I'll help you train too." Will was overjoyed to hear that. "Thank you very much, Professor." Time quickly reached the day of the selection exam. He was walking down the arena corridor, thinking that in the blink of an eye the exam day had arrived. Determination and resolve showed on his face. "I've prepared as much as I can, now it's time to fight." Suddenly a voice from behind made Will freeze. "Hey, Will." He turned puzzled and called, "Principal." Ulnuram smiled brightly and came to greet him. "Long time no see, my niece has been doing very well since then." Will replied with a smile, "That's great." He stared at Will and said, "Though you saved my niece, I apologize for only paying attention to you now. I know you've prepared yourself, but Schwarz must be tough, right?" Will put his hand on his chest confidently and answered, "I struggled at first, but I'm fine now." He said excitedly that he's aiming to be the champion of this selection exam. Ulnuram stroked his beard and laughed heartily, "Believable." Suddenly a bold voice from across the way approached. "Ridiculous, it's annoying to hear." The man slowly stepped toward the two of them. "This kid actually wants to compete for first place. Speaking as the field training supervisor, I need to teach you brats a lesson." He was the field training supervisor, Bode. Will turned to stare at him, starting to assess. "I've met him in my previous life." He recalled past memories. Bode, Purple Lightning, was an offensive mage who achieved many glorious feats in the Great War. While he was thinking, Bode stepped forward and grabbed Will by the collar. "Personally, I don't have fond memories of him." He radiated an overwhelming fiery presence. "Combat is the realm of talent, training and effort are merely additions." Bode snarled angrily in Will's face. "As a healer, you don't stand a chance of winning." Faced with the situation, Ulnuram intervened. "The test is about to start, let the results speak, arguing won't solve anything." Hearing that, Bode released him and said, "Argue, this is my way of teaching." He turned his back with utter confidence and added, "Besides, your opponent will be my Sirius." A teenage figure who had been standing in the distance approached. That youth was Sirius Bluenote. Will's gaze fixed on him again. Seeing that familiar silhouette coming toward him, he realized it was the genius Sirius Bluenote, the rival he had to defeat to take the lead. The two determined eyes locked onto each other with resolute intensity. Ulnuram stroked his beard and exclaimed, "Passion good, very good, but it's almost time. Come on, don't just stand there, let's go." The candidates quickly lined up and entered the arena. The stands erupted with excitement. The contestants stood in neat rows and awaited the command. Will turned to the side and asked, "Erica, you're participating too?" Erica wailed helplessly, "If I don't join, they'll cut my allowance." The guys behind glanced up at him with bullet-like stares. Will forced an awkward smile. He didn't want to be here at all. Ulnuram stood before the students and spoke. I'm proud to see so many applicants this year. Let your passion and fighting spirit burn bright. He raised a finger and explained, the preliminaries are about to begin. After a set time, those who remain will advance to the main round. Will thought nervously, a survival match with 100 people here. Isn't that way too crowded? As if reading his thought, Ulnurem slammed his staff into the ground. You might worry it's cramped, but don't be concerned. A beam of magic shot out, creating a dimensional space beneath everyone's feet. Everyone looked down in shock. What is this? Under the ground is an entire starry sky. He lifted his staff to the sky. It flashed like sunlight and a massive formation appeared begin. Will was teleported to a forest. He began to look around. Is this the forest behind the academy? Suddenly Ulnuram's voice rang out. Can you all hear me? I've just randomly teleported everyone. You can avoid strong opponents or cooperate with acquaintances. Erica panicked and shouted, where is this? Sirius listened with a surprised expression as Ulnuram spoke. Starting positions are all down to luck. Will looked up and marveled, teleporting that many people in an instant. Unbelievable. At his declaration, birds took flight. Now I declare the field training selection exam begun. He quickly sprang up and dashed forward first. He leapt onto a high branch to scout. Will activated his skill, concealing his presence, compressing all life activity and hiding his existence. A sudden noise from behind caught his attention. A pair was fighting a girl. On that side the youth commanded, go my golem. Erica saw it rushing in and swung her hammer. I'll crush you with this magical hammer. The girl there blew out a gust of cold, a blizzard. Will stood behind and smiled, observing, this is a good chance to study all kinds of offensive magic. Just aiming to pass the exam would be a waste. He curled his lips into a deep smile. Not bad, I want to use that move too. The youth and his golem had defeated the two girls on that side. Both of them cheered, arms thrown up. All right, I handled those two, see how strong my golem is. Suddenly Will slid behind him and replied, I can see it clearly. He reached out and grabbed the youth's head. Then he cast a spell using the sever consciousness technique. The youth's eyes went white and lifeless. He fell backward with the motion. Will placed his hand on the boy's head and began to sense and manipulate the flow of life force, causing his opponent to faint. I have to hold the opponent's head tight, so it's hard to use unless our levels aren't too far apart, but it can subdue an enemy without causing much injury. Will wiped sweat and forced a smile. This technique I came up with during special training with Professor Veronica. Luckily it works. Abruptly, he warily looked over his shoulder. 3 knives flew toward Will, but he quickly dodged them. He watched the sword embedded in the ground with great caution. This magic is. After confirming it, Will let out a huge sigh of relief. He looked toward Ulps and the 2 others approaching. Ulps, you truly never stop. He sneered and mocked. Don't you know what stop means? I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I am just doing my best to pass this exam. All 3 simultaneously cast their spells. With all the power I have, Will thought to himself, so it's 3 against 1 then. He unleashed blazing orange swordlights, a magic that forms blades. The brown-haired youth stepped forward, using a poison-enhancing spell. The 3 used their powers to launch the blades at will, a shadow clone magic. Ulps laughed loudly, triumphant. This pile of poison blades will target you. If one lands, you're done, and with this many, no matter how fast you are, you won't block them all. The blade streaked toward Will. He looked up at the toxin-tipped blades, thinking that using restorative magic to detox would work, but with so many, getting through without a scratch by only boosting physicals would be tough. His hand began to weave his own mana. If it's this then. Suddenly a faint afterimage rolled to his feet. The blade struck that afterimage and bounced off. Ulps broke into a sweat and shouted in disbelief, What the hell is that? The golem was now using its body as a shield in front of Will. He raised his hand and began to channel mana into it. Basically, restorative magic only affects living beings, but this golem self-operates by using the summoner's blood as an intermediary. In other words, it's a magical creature. He put his hand up and started directing it to attack. Though it can't perform complex actions like a living being, simply transmitting life force lets him control it. The golem quickly obeyed and charged at the 3. It swung a fist into the brown-haired guy's chest, making him spit blood. It then turned and sat on top of another, crushing him. No. Ulp stood aside, watching anxiously. Don't let those guys get taken down so easily. Suddenly an afterimage slid in front of him, startling him. Will's hand gripped his face. He smiled gently and said, all right, good night. Scene shifts again to the golem fighting 2 other players. Will watched from the tree, thinking that physical enhancement is only for close combat, but golems can cover that weakness. Besides, this lets me casually observe everyone's offensive magic. Suddenly his eyes widened in astonishment. From afar, a powerful vortex was sweeping toward Will's body. Will felt both panic and suspicion. What just happened? Suddenly a beam of magic shot over. Will mustered his strength and leapt off the tree. The force destroyed nearly half the forest. Even the two classmates from earlier and the golem were sprawled on the ground. Will stared bewildered at the devastation around him. From the smoke and dust a familiar figure slowly approached. It was Sirius, who finished casting a spell and advanced. Will thought, genius Sirius lives up to expectations, his power is impressive, defeating him won't be easy. He quickly slipped his hand into his pocket defensively. Should I try this, he wondered. His eyes narrowed as Ulnurim's announcement rang out. Stop. Everyone halted at the announcement. Well done, everyone, the preliminaries end here, the four who remain advance. A teleportation formation appeared beneath their feet. The finals will be held tomorrow at the arena, so rest until then. I will activate the teleportation magic. Stand still. While teleporting, Will turned to look at Sirius. He was staring at Will with murderous intent. Will broke out in a cold sweat, thinking that Sirius seemed just as eager for tomorrow. The finals are tomorrow. Everything quickly returned to calm as they left. Scene shifts to Will's room. He's sitting at his desk. He's jotting something down. What to do to pass the time today. Noise rose outside the door. That's enough, Ulps. The two who followed Ulps were forcefully restraining him. That guy is really strong, and I think he even healed us when we were unconscious. Ulps turned, eyes furious. Shut up, you common noble trash know nothing. According to House Omen's upbringing, being looked down on by a healer is absolutely unacceptable. He turned away to ponder, if this gets out, what will father say? The two glanced at each other, breaking into a cold sweat, and said nothing. Both sighed helplessly, turned their backs and left. Then go do it yourselves, Ulps were done, no one wants to get hit again, one called out in panic. Wait. The two ignored him and left on the spot. Ulps's face twisted in rage. Fine, I'll have to eliminate him. At that moment, Will was leisurely eating a pastry and reading, paying no attention. Suddenly, a knock on the door interrupted him. He closed the book and stood up. At this hour, Will stepped out and slowly opened the door, thinking some ill omen was afoot. Ulps greeted him with a pleasant face and outstretched hand. Good evening, Will, don't you think tonight is beautiful? He asked warily, what are you plotting? Ulps smiled back in a friendly way, plotting, I just want to have a calm chat with you. Ulps reached out and began, bluntly, I hate you, I utterly despise healers, I've set up all sorts of schemes to drive you out of this academy. Will recalled earlier scenes and thought to himself, I've shut down a few of your schemes too. Anyway, good night. He gave a mysterious smile, but I should have said it straight instead of beating around the bush. Ulps's face hardened and he ordered angrily, get out of this academy. Will shook his head in refusal. At this point I actually respect you, so why be so hostile toward me? He haughtily replied, why, I despise healers, what reason do I need? Ulps proudly pointed at himself. Even within House Omen, anyone born a healer is sent away to remote branches. My brother was the same, a weak, useless man. He began to recall his brother, even when mocked he just laughed it off. An arrogant offensive mage and a pathetic healer are two entirely different classes. Will's expression darkened as he replied, is that the kind of upbringing drilled into the nobility? Ulp spread his arms and commanded, if you understand, then get out of Schwarz. This place isn't for healers. Will's face stiffened, you think I'll say I give up? Ulps answered confidently, I'll make you say those words yourself. Greed showed in Ulps's eyes. You have someone you care about, right? Will's face knitted as he stared at him. What? Ulps smirked and began to recount. I had my servants investigate you, Will. Growing up with your sister in a remote village, you two must be very close, right? Will's expression clearly darkened. If I order my men, what will happen to your sister? Imagine it yourself. He stepped close to Will and asked, so decided yet? Will replied calmly, yes, I've decided. As he was about to put on an attitude, his neck was suddenly grabbed. If you understand, get out now, pack your things. Will shoved him forcefully backward with his hand. He sat down and bent the man's arm. Ulps trembled and muttered, begging stop it. Will looked utterly calm and used more force. I told you, I've decided. Ulps wailed desperately, stop. With a sharp cry, Ulps lay on the ground, groaning in pain. He continued to mutter, you think you'll get away with this? If I show them this broken arm, the academy won't let it go, my father too. Will took his arm and cast healing magic. It's fine, I healed it. Ulps was terrified at the sight. What are you going to do? His eyes went white again as he screamed in pain. Ulps's arm was broken once more. Then Will's magic healed it again. I'll heal it once more. He nonchalantly lifted the arm and broke it again. The man begged in agony, please don't. Will gave a wry smile and replied, my resolve isn't shallow. Mess with me is one thing, but you touched my sister and I won't sit idly by. The screams continued non-stop. Remember this well, from the depths of your heart I will break your will. Ulps lay on the ground in utter ruin. What the hell is this guy anyway? He looked at Will's smiling face and thought, this is bad, he's a demon in a healer's guise, never get involved with him again, I'd rather die than live like this. After a tense and dramatic moment, Will spoke, all right, good night, Ulps. He waved Ulps away like a soulless corpse. Don't forget your promise not to lay a hand on me again. Will stretched with great relief. To be honest, it felt pretty good. Okay, time to sleep and prepare for tomorrow. Scene shifts to the next day. Will stands on the arena, thinking the main rounds are about to begin. Ulnurim sat above, propping his hands and watching below. Bode sat beside Veronica, also observing. Will thought that the top 4 from the preliminaries would fight one-on-one elimination. Then he put a hand on his hip and said, I didn't expect you to make it through either. Erica stood shyly before him, only able to recall helplessly. I made a firewall and used a defensive strategy plus some luck. I actually didn't defeat anyone. Will thought helplessly. An offensive class mage who defends from start to finish is rare. He stared at Erica, worried. Can you hold out if you keep playing like that? She spoke timidly, we're friends after all, maybe go easy on me. Will replied firmly, no way, knew it. She raised her hand into an attack stance. Anyway, I've passed the cutoff, now I'll do my best. Seeing that, the referee raised a hand to signal. Then the match begins. Erica broke into a sweat as she cast her spell, come on. She launched a fireball toward Will. He quickly formed a hand shield to defend. His face didn't change, he thought, orthodox fire magic. At this power level my healing can still handle it. Will looked across and thought, sorry Erica, but I can deal with this easily. Suddenly Will's face turned extremely astonished. Something's off, this is. Erica sent out another fireball. It's not over yet. Will quickly dodged aside so the flames wouldn't reach him. He stared in surprise as flames enveloped him. Those hits kept burning and wouldn't go out. This is Erica's special magic. The fire magic had an unusually lingering quality, though its destructive power was only average. Getting hit repeatedly while assuming you can heal in time is dangerous. A memory of that plan surfaced. When she borrowed fire before it also burned for a long time, turns out it's not just salamander tail properties but amplified by her ability. Using that to create a firewall is indeed hard to break through, but in the end, Will felt a bit helpless and judged that it did reflect Erica's persistent nature. Students in the stands cheered for Erica. That girl's pretty good, take down that healer. Gradually she grew more confident. Oh my, could I actually beat Will? Right, I passed the preliminaries too, go on, Erica shouted boldly. If you want to surrender, do it now. But the opponent calmly replied, it's fine, I'm about to counterattack. She instinctively said, of course, then realized something was wrong. A fireball stronger than the last was launched. This one will definitely hit. Will's mouth curled into a half smile. If this fire doesn't go out. He raised his palm and touched the flame. Following a planned strategy, I'll use it to attack. Seeing that, Erica thought in astonishment. Use her own flame, a fire punch. With a moment's lapse in vigilance, Will had already appeared right in front of her. Her face went pale. Erica shrank back and blurted, I surrender, causing him to freeze. Terrified, she collapsed to the ground. The announcer's voice came over the loudspeaker. The winner, Will. From the stands came low curses. Still, Will felt no anger. Even when victorious, healers are not respected. But they turned to berate Erica. Don't surrender so easily, calling yourself an offensive mage. She hugged her head, trembling with fear. Just a moment ago they were cheering for me. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. He took her hand to comfort her. Don't worry about that, I think you fought very well, Erica. And if you also treat Erica, you'll surely have a chance to pass. Looking at the two hands clasped together, she blankly called. The romantic scene was shattered by someone's arrival. No way, that can't happen. Erica grabbed Will's shirt in fear. Bode snorted, raising a finger as he said, just try to imagine. And spat out some harsh words. Healers are nothing but useless trash. Surrendering to that kind of trash makes you worse than garbage. With that, Bode exuded a terrifying aura and made his decision, obviously failed, get lost so we can be done with you. She trembled but managed to reply, I'm leaving now. While Erica had already left, he turned back to scold the other. Isn't talking to a student like that a bit much? He used the excuse that he's the field training supervisor. If the participants are too incompetent, I have to say it straight, it's called tough love. As he spoke, Bode turned to leave, but his words seemed to imply something. It looks like only one person will pass this year. Suddenly a tiny voice sounded behind Will. you're blocking the way. Turning around he saw a familiar face. Sirius, when did you get here? And speak up a bit. As he passed he carefully asked, do you agree with Professor Bode? And Sirius answered, in the end strength is everything. Professor Bode is right because he's the strong one. Everyone has their own opinion. Will couldn't refute it, I understand. His tiny voice sounded, but I don't think you're weak either so. Sirius turned to place his trust in him, I hope you give it your all. He frowned and looked seriously at the person before him. The familiar name really brought back a lot, Sirius Bluenote. It reminded him that in his previous life he'd heard of an offensively powerful mage of his generation on the northern front. The gusts he created swept everything away around him, and he felled many opponents. That power truly overwhelmed all. Finally it was the final match, Will versus Sirius. Before the match Will started a conversation. Judging by Professor Bode's attitude it seemed he wouldn't be acknowledged unless he won. The confident, familiar smile returned to his face, so I'm certain I'll win. Facing him Sirius calmly replied, is that so? After the two contestants exchanged a few words, the referee shouted, final of the selection exam, the match begins. A gust of wind rose from beneath their feet. A giant wind unleashed by a hand much smaller than it. Will lightly dodged to the side. He stamped his feet and bolts of electricity shot out. Will pushed off to advance toward his opponent. Sirius's features became clearer by the moment. Suddenly, a strong wind rose around him, forcing him to step back. It was so powerful Will had to shield his face with his hand. After a bout of testing each other, he no longer rushed in to attack as usual. I get it, I really can't get close. Who will win this match, Will or Sirius? The result will be decided soon. A cloud of dust rose in the arena. Sirius said wearily, too fast, what a nuisance. Mana gathered in his palm, so how about this? A powerful gust appeared, but its form was different from the column of wind earlier. Will also notice the difference. Not a vortex but a wind that blew away a wide area. He was also casting magic on himself. At this rate I'll be blown off the arena. Then he squatted and pressed his palm to the ground. Had to use this then. A strange phenomenon occurred. A small sapling began to grow, and at last it sprouted and grew into a great tree. Sitting in the stands, Erica wondered in amazement, is that a healing spell too? Admiration for Will arose, he's even stronger now. About this technique he's extremely confident. Professor Veronica, what do you think? A leaf fell from the tree. Below was Veronica's bewildered face. What is this? Will stepped forward to explain why the tree grew from the ground. I infused life energy into the plants so they would grow rapidly. I read about offensive plant control magic in the library and thought I could do it too. With this move my tactics will vary according to the species of tree. Suddenly his vision blurred. Caught off guard, Will's unsteady body was supported by her. Veronica calmly lifted him and asked, are you okay? He scratched his head and cautiously asked, I'm fine, but does this mean I'm about to run out of mana? Still scratching his face without much concern, he said, the books never mentioned this move being so draining. The other person suddenly spoke in a low voice, so it is as I thought. He asked suspiciously, what do you mean? She had to explain the situation. Destruction is always easier than healing. Restorative magic consumes far more mana than offensive spells, and using healing magic offensively will be extremely inefficient in mana usage. Another piece of knowledge to absorb. Understood, I must consider timing carefully when using it. Back in the present, Will was very confident, thinking to himself, this is the moment. I never had a knack for offensive magic anyway, I'll overcome these disadvantages. But facing the massive tree ahead, Sirius calmly raised his hand. The tree was instantly split in two by a razor wind. This move he hadn't expected a wind blade to appear, he even has that technique too. Will's mind listed the types of techniques he used. A vortex that brutally devours enemies, a whirlwind that blows away an entire area. Wind blades that can cut through hard wood. Anyone who came near would be flung away by the vortex around him. After listing them, he concluded, the magic is too strong with no openings, truly the caliber of a top candidate. However, Will wouldn't give up easily. I've resolved to become powerful with this very magic. Thinking that, he immediately lunged forward. Once more within his protective wind, Sirius said nonchalantly, no matter how many times you try, you'll never touch me. His whole body was flung far away, but the corner of his mouth curved into a smile. Noticing that, he couldn't help feeling puzzled. Suddenly, a sharp tree shot up and pierced Sirius's shoulder. As soon as it did, it burrowed back into the ground, leaving him stunned. What was that? Will kindly stepped forward to explain, your vortex can't protect underground, right? This plant sends roots deep into the soil and can sprout anywhere. Actually, they're rhizomes, not roots. Glancing at a familiar silhouette behind the stands, Sirius clicked his tongue in annoyance. After a pause, curious, he asked, are you that concerned about Professor Bode? You two don't seem compatible at all. Bode frowned watching the match below. The answer was simple, he's strong and he teaches me. But Will didn't believe it at all just for that. You don't need to learn from him, you come from a distinguished family, don't you? The other fell silent, then began to tell his story. In my clan, magical ability is everything. Age or gender doesn't matter, the strongest becomes leader, so everyone is an enemy vying for succession. My own father refused to teach me magic. He muttered in irritation at such a family. Sirius concluded that following the professor was the best way to grow stronger. After their talk, the battle resumed. Done yet? The shoulder you hit still hurts like hell. Everyone looked on in fear at the immense power before them. Will forced a smile as he surveyed the scene. A dragon formed from wind had appeared, time to end this. The dragon lunged at his opponent, and now Sirius was truly serious. Lately deep down, I thought the attacking mages were just playing, that I was the one trying harder, fighting without innate talent, but it's true. Having talent doesn't mean you're extraordinary or superior. Family background, talent, or past, it's all on equal footing. Because of that, he suddenly laughed and said, Sirius, now I really want to beat you, just telling myself that. The two faced each other like old enemies. What are you declaring? A magic circle appeared on the ground. Rise, my finest seed. Massive branches erupted instantly, leaves sprouting lushly outward. A magic circle formed within the trunk of the great tree. It was called Yggdrasil. It's a species that normally takes ages to grow huge, but forcing it to grow this fast consumes far more mana than other trees. The dragon and tree collided violently, but the more mana I poured in, the taller it grew. The wind was so strong Will had to step back. The dragon ultimately shattered the tree. Sirius, standing at a distance, sighed in relief. A branch was sent flying into the sky by the gust. But it wasn't a branch, it was that massive trunk. He hadn't expected his vision to be deceived. So Sirius was so shocked he blurted, what? Once more he had to explain clearly. This species has extremely vigorous vitality, even a single twig can become enormous. Since Sirius was forming a wind dragon, he wouldn't have time to defend. Finally the trunk fell face down on the ground. Sirius was struggling to crawl out from under the huge tree crushing him. In front of him stood Will, steady, pointing the tip of his sword at Sirius. Cutting through Will's heavy breathing came the announcer's voice. The winner, Will. The event left everyone in the stands stunned. They started buzzing, hey, that healer actually won, beat Sirius in a duel, maybe he's really strong. From the moment the match was decided, Sirius remained silent with his head bowed. Will reached out kindly to help him up, exclaiming it was a close one, truly genius material, but contrary to that warmth was Sirius's disappointment. Not good enough. Will was surprised to hear that, commenting on the match, he said, what do you mean not enough? It was a great fight. At that moment, a voice echoed, how disappointing, followed by a tremendous bolt of lightning striking the arena. Smoke rose after the thunder's aftershock. Sirius took the full hit and promptly lost consciousness. Bode stepped forward and casually kicked apart the trunk, pinning Sirius. With one hand, he hoisted him up with practiced ease. Bode carried Sirius away, furious and disappointed in him. You failed, Sirius, I'll train you again. His words drew gasps from the crowd, too harsh. Bode imposed his views on everyone and grew angrier. The lot in the stands think the same as me. I would never accept a healer taking first place. Seeing his aggressive attitude, no one in the stands dared to resist or even move. Only Will dared to speak. He had the right to, outraged by Bode's words, this is too much. I am the one who won, but that doesn't mean Sirius is weak. It was a close match, and if we fought again. Bode's gaze on him was ferocious. He wouldn't tolerate dissent. Don't you dare contradict me. A great match promising for the future. You fools, on the battlefield only strength matters. Losing means being treated like garbage and left to die, nothing more. Will sensed the man's vile character and felt indignation for Sirius, even toward his own pupil. Will confidently pointed to himself, then I defeated Sirius, I proved my strength. Bode's anger swelled, his voice dropped to something terrifying, that level of power. Bode slowly approached Will, closing the distance to pressure him. But Will remained calm and began to reason with him. It's true we can't fight, but we support others with healing magic. That's a division of roles. Without cooperative unity, humanity would perish. Bode fell silent for a moment upon hearing that, his expression unchanged. Bode made a motion as if brushing dust from his clothes and said casually, my students stood firm on the front lines to let you healers escape. Those healers were then swept away mercilessly by the swarms of monsters during the retreat. My students, maimed and with nowhere to return to, were all killed. You couldn't even stand on the battlefield, couldn't even save my students. Because of scum like them, why did Sirius have to sacrifice himself? As his last words ended, he was already readying a punch aimed at Will. He stood motionless, hearing the buried grievances. Will also acknowledged that Professor Bode had a point, and countless battlefield images flashed through his mind. Then reminded himself that an age in which monsters grow more ferocious is about to arrive. When that happens, those who hold power must not be selfish. He clenched his fist and slowly spoke. Then, those of us with nothing must become even stronger. If I defeat you, will you acknowledge me? Bode lowered his hand and curled his lip, treating his words like a joke. Bode turned to instruct the match referee. You, once the next bout begins, take that kid and leave here. The man, surprised, wanted to confirm. Professor Bode, you don't mean you'll fight for real, do you? Bode answered firmly. Once it's a selection, I make the rules. As the referee carried Sirius away, he glanced at Will, full of worry. But in Will's eyes at that moment there was determination, not a trace of fear. Seeing the scene, the referee could only shake his head and sigh. As he led Sirius off the arena, the grimmer struggle officially began. The special match, Bode versus Will, commenced. Bode rubbed his hands to warm up, and a powerful surge of energy was produced. He carried full confidence and contempt for his opponent. I'll show you how low your level is. Bode's overwhelming presence and power made Will cautious. His mana was nearly exhausted, and this opponent was the strongest yet. You can't win by ordinary means. First I have to use this. Watching how he cast his move, Bode attacked too. His assessment was too slow. Will looked up as light from Bode's magic shone across his face. His attack was tremendously powerful, as if tearing space itself. After that assault, its aftershock left swirling clouds of dust and smoke. Bode raised 3 fingers in triumph. Let me teach you 3 reasons why my victory is absolute. First, overwhelming distance to control the enemy. Second, speed that leaves the opponent no time to react. And finally, finishing power in a single blow. The opponent can do nothing, it's over, or have you stopped hearing me? Just as he assumed the enemy had failed, Will's voice rose slowly. Where is this one-hit finishing power? Contrary to his hopes, Will remained firmly kneeling on the ground. His body had only minor scratches, nothing serious. He had successfully calculated everything. He knew Bode possessed a special thunder technique. To minimize damage from lightning, he had to avoid a direct hit to his torso. No matter how skilled he is, if the brain or heart is struck, healing magic can't save him in time. So he created an excellent conductive blood pathway, conducting electricity from arm to leg, then into the ground, dispersing the current to reduce harm. This was just enough to hold on. Will began to channel his power again, feeling more confident. Now it was his turn to counterattack. Bode scratched his head, still full of contempt, as if saying you only survived that blow by sheer will, but Will paid little heed to his words and continued to cultivate internal energy, enhancing his physical strength. Something went wrong, he couldn't execute the technique, his body went limp and collapsed forward. He looked at his hands, his body was trembling violently. What? I can't channel strength into my body. Bode had anticipated it. He explained the mechanism of the move. The absolute rule is that anyone struck by my death lightning will be paralyzed and unable to move. Will refused to give up. He raised the hand with the knife through it to attack, exclaiming bad. Bode's smug smile appeared again. He kept his contemptuous demeanor. You were fine before, weren't you? Bode attacked him again directly, this time seemingly even stronger than before. In the stands, Erica was so worried for him she began to cry. Will was still struggling to resist the relentless magic assaults, secretly cursing, damn, he's really strong. His innate magic truly had no gaps. Now I understand why he's so arrogant. Even so, I've decided I will win. As that thought solidified, Will placed his hand on the ground. This is my final seed and my last spell. Plant manipulation. Grow Aquaguardian tree. As soon as he finished speaking, a massive tree sprang up to block his view. Will had calculated this carefully. The tree absorbs and stores a huge amount of water from the earth. Used as a shield, it will disperse the lightning. Bode remained utterly confident. He believed that move of his would do nothing to him. Is that so? With that question was astonishment deep in Will's eyes. Everyone in the stands was also gaping in amazement. The protective tree Will summoned was snapped in two by Bode, unable to withstand him. Staring at the destroyed tree, Will couldn't believe it and shouted, impossible. Bode strode over full of confidence, still showing contempt. Is that your ultimate move, ending with such a pathetic defense? But as he approached the tree more closely, Bode noticed a mushroom growing on its trunk. Then, as if triggered, a forest of mushrooms began to sprout without stop. Of course, this astonished Bode. He shouted in bewilderment, what the hell is this? Will pulled the knife from his palm and smiled faintly. I didn't expect it to work this well. Some plants and fungi have spores that germinate rapidly after being struck by lightning. A forest burned to ash by lightning is the perfect growth opportunity because there's no competition. The foam blower mushroom is one of those, but that's not its only trait. Bode involuntarily watched the thousands of mushrooms growing. He still couldn't believe it. What? Soon after, a strange sensation spread through his body, startling him. Bode looked at his arm. Now it felt as if a current ran through him. His whole body went numb. Will seized the golden opportunity. This was the moment. He lunged forward with a punch full of his power. Faced with that, Bode showed no worry and kept smiling. Bode quickly counterattacked. He punched Will squarely, sending him flying. Will couldn't react in time to the counterstrike and was knocked down. Seeing Will kneeling like that made him despise him even more. Stupid. Clearly I'm superior in close combat too. My specialty magic is electricity control. If I use it to enhance my body and move at high speed, that numbness is nothing. Will's whole body trembled. He clenched his hands to support himself, still unable to believe it. No way, even after going this far, I still can't win. Bode's gaze sharpened. He ground out each word like a sentence of judgment. Then you have lost. As soon as the words left his mouth, Bode prepared to unleash the final blow to finish him. But at that moment Veronica appeared, pointing her sword at Bode and demanding he stop. That's enough. Isn't this going a bit too far? Professor Bode. Bode paused slightly and laughed loudly in mockery. He turned and pushed her blade away. Veronica, don't interfere when you're just a newbie. Will, trembling over there, realized he had a savior, Professor Veronica. Veronica wanted it to end here. She argued the match was decided and continuing would only needlessly injure him. Bode objected. That kid can self-heal. He can still fight. Veronica continued insisting on protecting Will. Only while he still has mana. He doesn't have enough mana left. The more she spoke, the angrier Bode became. He wanted to attack Veronica as well. He just lacks the will to fight. She refused to back down. Veronica began to gather her chi, ready to fight. There's nothing more to discuss. The two launched at each other, signaling a major battle was about to erupt. But luckily a voice rang out then, stopping both of their fierce wills. Enough, both of you. Ulnuram appeared, looking down at the two from above. Ulnuram spoke up to admonish them. Having you two brawling here is the most pointless thing. He descended slowly, gentle as silk. Ulnuram looked toward Bode and calmly said, Bode, stop this. He closed his eyes with a warning in them. Bode felt that his face was not comfortable. But the order couldn't be argued. Bode scratched his head and agreed. Fine. Ulnuram then turned to Veronica, his expression completely different than with Bode. Veronica, I'm sorry I didn't explain clearly. He raised a hand to his mouth and coughed a few times to draw everyone's attention. Ulnuram officially announced, the main portion of the field training selection exam ends here. Everyone disperse at once. People did not linger and slowly moved out of the arena. Will was still struggling to self-treat his wounds. He winced in pain. Damn, I'm out of mana. The healing isn't progressing at all. I don't want to lose. Is the gap really this big? Veronica said nothing and simply picked him up. Will was extremely embarrassed. Even calling her name was difficult. Professor Veronica. She calmly comforted and encouraged him. You did very well, don't push yourself, rest. Will shyly bowed his head. He whispered, I understand, but inside he still wasn't satisfied. Did I do well? That's still not enough. A night gradually passed. As he walked, Will kept silently judging. That was the power of a top-tier offensive mage, not just raw strength, but a level of tactical finesse completely different from the rest. But even with them, humanity still perished. I need to become even stronger. He went to a room. Will opened the door, looked inside, and spoke politely, May I come in? Ulnuram was inside. He greeted him warmly. Will, glad you came. He stroked his beard and asked about him with concern. Your wounds seem fine, just as I predicted. Or rather, without waiting for him to ask further, Will explained directly. Once my mana recovers, these injuries will heal immediately. Ulnuram laughed heartily and affirmed, then participating in the field training won't be a problem. Hearing this surprised Will, he asked again to be sure, am I allowed to join? Ulnuram took it as obvious. You won the main event, of course. Besides you, Sirius and Erica also passed. Will still seemed disbelieving, but sir, Professor Bode said everyone failed and I didn't even win. Ulnuram, understanding, explained, that's the case every year. This surprised Will again. Every year, Ulnuram revealed Bode's purpose. He says failing everyone this year creates pressure to awaken the student's true potential, but in the end he still passes a few. After all, field training carries many dangers. It's his way of proving himself a proper teacher. After hearing this, Will judged. He's clumsy as a person, but I can see the reasoning. In his previous life, Bode always fought on the front lines for humanity. No doubt he was one of the heroes who strove to save the world. Although I dislike his words and actions, he has his own pride. Not letting Will wait long, Ulnurem quickly assigned him the task. Now, Will, you'll form a team with students from other academies as an offensive mage, and you'll carry out requests to exterminate monsters. Will was still dazed. He quietly repeated those 4 words, exterminate monsters. This was the first time facing monsters since his rebirth. 5 years later in his previous life, these monsters were the direct cause of humanity's extinction. First, consider their origin. Monster originally referred to any creature possessing magical power. Not all monsters are hostile to humanity. They sometimes attack humans, but that's survival behavior, part of natural competition. If you understand their ecology, they can be neighbors we make use of. However, in about 2 years the world will change. The blood moon. Monsters exposed to that red moonlight become extremely brutal. And from then on the tragedy began. Monsters gathered together. They started slaughtering humans purely for the sake of massacre. 2 years later, the Demon King descended to the world. Humanity quickly fell into a disadvantageous position. Many died and nations collapsed. Offensive mages were highly valued on the battlefield, but because of that they were sacrificed one after another. The same happened to the Great Knights. Healers did not go to the front lines. Once the battle line collapsed, they were simply consumed by monsters. By the time I died, there was almost no one left who could fight. In less than a few months, humanity would be extinct. Will clenched his fist and vowed to himself, I cannot let that tragedy repeat. I need to become stronger than anyone from my previous life and seize power to fight the massive monster invasion. And if possible, discover the cause, the origin of the blood moon that turns monsters brutal. Ulnurem saw him deep in thought. He stroked his beard and remarked, strong resolve, your gaze is like the day we first met. He gently encouraged him, keep this up and you'll be fine. Will felt a little worried. Fine, the teachers take field training pretty seriously, Ulnurem stepped over and placed a hand on his shoulder, looking pleased. That's part of it, but I wanted to speak with you especially. Will looked at him puzzled, with the wide-eyed stare of a startled fawn. After talking with Ulnurem, Will went to the gathering point for those selected for the field training. He and Erica were already there. They only waited for the remaining person, Sirius. After a short wait, there was some movement. Sirius arrived, and ahead of him strode the big, burly Bode. Will stepped up to him and spoke first. I heard you are strict because you care about your students. Bode leaned his face close to Will's and let out a fierce shout. He straightened, hands on his hips, voice full of aggression. I don't know what you're talking about, but you're weak trash. If you can't land a hit on me, then don't get cocky. Will felt embarrassed by his attitude and murmured yes, mentally complaining that nothing had changed. Bode walked past him, exhaling loudly, understood, then focus on the field training, you idiot. But I'll thank you for taking care of Sirius. At that moment Sirius, who stood behind him, spoke slowly, me too. Will was startled at his sudden appearance behind him. Sirius, Will silently judged him, still so reserved. Sirius clenched his fist and punched the air in determination. Thanks to you, I can give my all in training and become stronger. That's Professor Bode's lesson. As long as you survive and can take revenge, it's not a loss. Will felt the same energy and raised his hand to bump fists. Good, keep getting stronger. Sirius curled his lips into a cheerful smile. He reached out to bump fists with Will as a promise. Then he quickly moved over to Bode's side. Will watched him go, feeling fortunate. Having more excellent offensive mages is good. It will surely make the fight against monsters easier. From afar, Veronica reminded him, Will, we should go too. Will happily answered, I'm looking forward to this trip too. On the way to the training site inside the carriage, Veronica announced, we're approaching Dunkel Forest, let me confirm the training details. This time you'll be assigned to a goblin sweeping mission in Dunkel Forest. 3 students from Schwarz, Heilig, and Silburn form a 4-person team with an instructor from one of the schools supporting. Erica asked, have the team members been decided? Veronica confirmed to her, yes, Erica is on my team too. Erica thought inwardly, better than strangers, but Professor Veronica is a bit intimidating. Then Veronica briefly introduced Will's teammates. Your team isn't mediocre at all. We've arrived. Veronica led the way, stepping down first and announcing, let's go. Looks like the Silburn participants are already here. Will stepped down from the carriage, recalling his previous life and confirming, Silburn, I knew of them before, but we don't really know each other now. Suddenly a sweet female voice called out, Lord Will. Marie rushed over and hugged Will tightly. I've been waiting for the day to meet you. Her action astonished everyone standing there. Will was nearly smothered. He politely raised both hands in the air and said, "Wait, sorry, but I don't know who you are." Marie suddenly realized she'd gone a bit far. She let go of him. "Oh, I see. Anyway, we didn't have a proper conversation back then." She now formally introduced herself. "I'm Marie Goldgren, granddaughter of Schwarz Academy's headmaster Ulnuram Goldgren." Upon her introduction, Will realized, it's that girl from before. His memory of Marie now passed clearly through his mind. Will was a little surprised and murmured, "I didn't expect to meet again the girl I once treated at the headmaster's house." He asked after her health. "Since then, how have you been?" Marie flexed her hands to show strength and confirmed, "Completely fine, sir. I'm sorry I couldn't properly thank you then." Will hastily waved it off. "It's nothing. My grandfather already recommended you to Schwarz Academy." Marie looked at him and pointed to herself, insisting she wanted to find a way to repay the favor. "Since I lack magical talent, I entered Silburn Academy and devoted myself to swordsmanship training. Thanks to that, I ranked first in the academy's entrance exam." Will, surprised by her skill, couldn't help exclaiming, "Top of the class." Marie shyly covered the corner of her smiling mouth. "Turns out I have an aptitude for the sword." Will could only utter a surprised wow. He looked at the small girl before him and assessed silently. To rise from being bedridden to leading in such a short time, she can't be a monster, right? She stepped forward, took his hand and raised it. "I will surely be helpful to you, Lord Will. That's why we're placed on the same team." After learning more about her, Will gladly agreed, "Then let's do our best together." Will also realized something, so this was the headmaster's intention when he said he relied on you. Marie noticed a carriage approaching them. She quickly grabbed Will's hand and ran. "The people from Heilig have arrived, let's go greet them." Erica was also surprised at how quickly they bonded. "They seem happy." Veronica added, "We should liven up our team's atmosphere a bit." Marie led him to the carriage and fumbled about, searching, "Where are our team members? Is Lord Ren and Lord Turf here?" At the mention of those names, Will reacted slightly. "Ren, huh?" A voice from inside the carriage answered calmly, "Don't rush me, I'm coming out now." That person finally stepped down from the carriage. He introduced himself and asked the first question. "I am Ren, are you the students joining my team?" This man was the Heilig Academy instructor, Ren Kaidos. Upon seeing him, Will became extremely excited. "Master." He was the mentor who taught him healing magic in his previous life, the best healer I ever knew. He was so pleased his body trembled slightly that they could be on the same team. Behind Ren was another person who called out to him, "Teacher, move over a bit, I can't get down." As the young man stepped down, Marie quickly greeted, "You must be Lord Turf, I'm Marie from Silburn." Turf pushed up his glasses and replied politely, "Very pleased to meet you all." After adjusting his glasses, Turf saw Will and Marie's hands clasped together and it struck him like a lightning bolt. The excitement and cheer vanished, leaving only indifference. "And you?" Will, unaware, cheerfully introduced himself. "I'm Will from Schwarz." Turf turned his face, his tone slightly disappointed with a hint of contempt. "An offensive mage, huh?" After everyone finished introductions, Ren turned and left with a long yawn. "All right, this is Ren's group, do as you please, I'll just watch." Marie was a bit surprised by his casual, laissez-faire attitude. Is that his working style? Will treated it as routine, the master is always like that. He quietly followed behind him. Will made a request, "May I call you master?" Ren was slightly surprised by the suggestion, "Call me that." Will quickly explained, "I can also use healing magic, but I don't have a teacher right now, so I thought I'd learn from you." Ren was astonished to learn of his ability. An offensive mage who also knows healing magic. "I vaguely heard about this before. It's a deliberately arranged team composition." Will asked again to confirm, "Is that okay, master?" Ren wasn't particular about forms of address and accepted, "Call me whatever you like." Marie, overhearing, joined in, "If Lord Will calls you that, I'll call you master too." Turf, trailing behind, called after Marie, "Wait, Marie." Erica was again surprised at how quickly Will and his teammates bonded. They became close so fast. Veronica didn't want to be outdone. "We can't fall behind either." In this conquest campaign, each team will take responsibility for an assigned area. We'll use this tent as our base. The goblins' territory is a bit deeper in, so Will, Marie, and the master should depart immediately. In real combat, the healer doesn't go to the front line but stays at the base. That's why I didn't participate in my previous life. On the way, Marie wondered, even though the master is a healer, will you still go to the front line? Ren explained quickly, basically I'm the supervisor for this. I'm fine, do what you students want. I don't like strict constraints either. Marie matched his relaxed rhythm. Then I won't be formal anymore. Will hesitated slightly and pointed behind her. By the way, not formal, what I mean is. Marie understood immediately, of course. She quickly prepared to draw her weapon. Marie gripped a massive greatsword with both hands, confident and ready to unleash her full strength. I'll swing the sword with everything I've got. After finishing off the monsters, Marie happily danced on the ground, even leaping onto a pile of slain monsters arranged like a tower to celebrate. The great difference made will wonder is that this girl, the one who used a gentle face to address him as Lord Will. Marie launched herself, swinging the enormous greatsword with a determined glare. Will looked up in stunned admiration. This was Marie's swordsmanship. Each slash carried terrifying power. Perhaps she alone would be enough to clear this place out. Just as he recovered, Marie suddenly froze, eyes wide in surprise. Seeing the monsters steadily closing in, she couldn't help exclaiming, there are so many of them. Ren, observing Marie, murmured his assessment. She's certainly impressive but exposes too many openings. The lady is good at wide area attacks but seems weak when surrounded. Cover her. Will, hearing that, Will quickly replied, understood. He fell silent for a while, joy swelling in his chest. Finally, I'm about to fight monsters. A monster charged with razor-sharp teeth, and a roar that shattered the area's stillness. Will's expression darkened as he thought to himself, those monsters are terrifying. A hand suddenly touched Will's shoulder from behind, sending a chill down his spine. A calm, deep voice suddenly rang out, why are your shoulders so tense? Relax. Will looked up with a pensive, slightly surprised expression, saying nothing. After a long moment he smiled faintly and replied cordially, yes. Will thought to himself, just like before, this person is unchanged. The tips of his fingers touched each other directly, forming a dazzling source of power. Will cast a spell called Body Enhancement with his hand. His toes shifted slightly, his starting stance was ready to sprint. Will charged forward, with just a few light sword strikes he nearly wiped out half the monsters. Two backs collided immediately. They're counting on you over there, yes. Will quickly gained the upper hand, gripping his sword with authority as blood sprayed everywhere. He seemed to relax and exhaled comfortably. So this is what fighting with healing magic feels like. The monsters were completely annihilated in an instant, sprawled on the ground. He thought to himself, not bad at all. Good, it works on the monsters too. Will picked up the knife and pondered. The blade Professor Veronica gave him is incredibly sharp, very different from Ulp's knife. Marie leapt up in joy, her heart blooming. With explosive strength like a spring and exquisite swordsmanship, Lord Will is truly wonderful. Ren, standing among them, suddenly spoke. All right, that's enough for the first day. Let's head back. The smile at the corner of Marie's mouth faded. She looked down in resignation, feeling suddenly much lighter. Will added, that's thanks to the master. He thought to himself that evaluating healing ability would involve metrics like the severity of wounds or types of illnesses that can be cured. But the master's strength lay in recovery speed. He healed so naturally that one might not even notice magic was being used. Because of that, non-healers couldn't appreciate how remarkable it was. I once asked him about it. He suddenly waved his hand and smiled lightly. I can't keep doing flashy things like that. As long as they're healed, that's all that matters most. Ren walked on, leaving behind silently falling leaves and the lonely forest. The world knew nothing, but the greatest healer in the world was Ren. Even so, this is still a pretty good team. The four sat huddled around the table. Ren directly broke the silence. Today was a success. Turf spoke up unexpectedly. Everyone returned and no one was injured, so I didn't have to do anything. Ren raised his bowl and praised loudly. No, providing recovery through meals at the base is also a healer's duty, right? That bowl is Turf's special recovery soup with Ren's seasoning. Turf looked up and said softly, Master, you did very well. He snorted and spoke politely. That flavor is partly thanks to my special spice. Marie, sitting opposite, smiled with pleasure and flattered. Master is truly amazing, not only as a healer but he also seems very knowledgeable about the front lines. I wonder why. Ren heard this and nodded contentedly, explaining, the front line is where most people get injured. If you treat them there, basic knowledge naturally accumulates. Turf continued, The master frequently travels to many different locations, which is why he rarely teaches regular classes. Will sipped his soup and enjoyed it. Aren't those places very dangerous? I'm confident in my ability to run away. Ren spoke firmly, raising a hand. I only say that, unless someone needs saving, I would never run. Losing the master would be a heavy blow to humanity. Not only because he is an excellent healer, but also because he is one of the few who knows what to do in real combat. Will thought to himself that fate may have changed for him and the others, but there was still time before that incident occurred. His eyes narrowed, more pensive than ever. Not sure what was happening, he lifted his bowl and kept slurping, vowing that in this life he would never let the master die. Will lifted the big bowl and ate quickly. Ren, seeing this, awkwardly remarked that the boy had quite an appetite. Make another bowl, please, master is wonderful. The little tent buzzed with more liveliness than ever. Meanwhile, someone was quietly marshalling his forces in the dark night. A hand stretched out, revealing an eye-shaped sigil that emitted a great power, the power of the crimson moon. Right there, the monsters opened their mouths in savage grins, their eyes bloodshot and gleaming. At the same time, a huge foot stepped forward. He was an orc, one of the higher-ranking monsters. The next day, we set out again to exterminate the goblins. We shared experiences from yesterday's battle and our team coordination noticeably improved. At this rate, we thought the mission could be completed by tomorrow. Yet the three of them stood straight-faced and not particularly pleased. Their boots remained on the soft green grass. Ren called out, causing Will and Marie to turn their heads in unison. Let's head back. Marie suddenly objected, her voice questioning. Why, we haven't defeated a single one today, Will asked, is something ahead? Ren didn't answer directly, only calmly explained that, on the contrary, there were no traces of anything at all. Goblins have a strong territorial instinct. If an outsider invades, they'll rush out to attack like yesterday. But we've come this far and haven't seen a single one. A voice rang out, only now you notice. What's going on? He sighed and lowered his tone cautiously. I don't know, but on the battlefield you should trust your instincts. Ren turned and waved, giving orders. That's it for today. Return and by the way contact another nearby group to rendezvous. Marie looked up and spoke instinctively. I believe Professor Veronica's group has a base nearby. Hearing that, Ren turned and smiled faintly, the corner of his eye curving. You really have good intel, let's go. Will stepped forward, scanning the surroundings bit by bit. The three walked through the desolate mountains and forests, not a single animal in sight. Their behavior was abnormal compared to usual. It felt really wrong. Marie led the way, pushing aside branches to clear a path. Will reach the road near the neighboring base. Sunlight streamed dazzlingly through the leaves, creating a warm space. I can't stop thinking about my previous life, even though I know I shouldn't, but Will suddenly froze, his face darkening. He saw a small hand bound tightly with a thick rope. A small, sullen face with no smile stared down below. It was Erica. She was tied fast to a straight wooden post. Marie rushed forward, raising her hand and shouting excitedly, I'll save you right now. She stepped quickly forward, not noticing her small feet were perilously close to danger. Marie suddenly tumbled into a trap, muddy and covered in dirt. Will immediately shouted from afar. She pulled something out from behind with a determined look. That thing was being quickly wrenched from the ground by Marie. She grabbed the spear and raised it as a shield. She smiled brightly and reassured, I'm fine. The two stood frozen, not uttering a word. What a trap, and they used Erica as bait. Before Will could recover, Ren stepped in front of him and shouted loudly, hey, more of them are coming. A sharp spear was hurtling toward them. The two immediately took defensive stances, angrily shouting, we're surrounded. The monsters streamed forward with fierce momentum. At that moment, Marie also struggled and quickly crawled out of the trap's mouth. Will's gaze was now cold and terrifying. He lowered his voice and said, we're surrounded. The monsters kept coming closer without a trace of fear. Will frowned and cursed inwardly. So cunning, they're hunting humans. This is exactly like the monsters' change after the Red Moon. No, the Red Moon shouldn't appear for another 2 years. Could that tragedy already be beginning? Erica, tied up, let out a soft, painful groan. He turned to look and was surprised to think quietly that she's still alive. There was no time to dwell on it. I'd gained the power to fight for moments like this. Marie gripped the large sword in her hands, feeling a pang and thinking it's a good thing she's still alive, but Will leaped down and shouted, leave her to me. I'll combine plant manipulation with what I've learned. He shouted an order, manifest. The monsters, unwilling to yield, answered with a roar. Will turned and seeing her anxious demeanor, said bluntly, Marie, you don't need to be on the front line. Standing behind the melee unit will make it easier to exploit openings. She responded quickly, understood. More importantly, charge your energy properly. Her whole body shone brilliantly. Suddenly her feet froze as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing, then launched a wide area attack to break their formation. Marie didn't stand idle either and declared, "Watch my full force strike." From behind, suddenly one of them attempted a sneak attack. But suddenly with a single sword stroke Will quickly felled that one, his voice ringing out, "I'll cover you, let no one slip through." That one was left lying flat on the grass behind her. Ren from afar praised without restraint, "Well done, you two, I'll rescue her." Will hurried off, calling back loudly, "Leave it to the master." Suddenly he turned and a chill surged up, a terrible feeling. His pupils immediately dilated. The red moon's influence makes them more ferocious. Ren dashed quickly toward Erica. He strode quickly, not noticing the change occurring beneath the ground. A tall silhouette suddenly rose up and blocked the view, showing that the monsters were coordinating with each other. It was an orc. It had been hiding underground. "Not good, the distance is too great, I won't make it in time." It raised its hand and swung a fist at Ren. It had been like this in a previous life too. The master never abandoned the wounded. "From now on, I will be the greatest healer in the world." He witnessed that scene and ground his teeth. "No matter how excellent a healer is, living like that would take me many lifetimes to fix." The fist loomed right before his eyes. A helpless voice rang out, "Master." Ren also froze for a moment, saying nothing. The monster stretched out its arm forcefully and advanced, moving with more majesty than ever. He gave a faint, leisurely smile and lowered his voice to wonder, "Wait, what's going on here? Was that a physical enhancement just now? Did the master use a healing spell to attack?" The monster used its bloodshot, piercing eyes to try to mercilessly eliminate targets around it. It whipped its arms wildly toward Ren. Fortunately, he nimbly dodged. Ren's feet sprang off the ground, leaving specks of dirt on his canvas shoes. He dashed quickly behind the monster and used a stealth strike. Ren lightly touched the back of its neck and said, "Farewell, sleep well." A beam of blue light shot through the back of the monster's neck, startling it. It immediately sensed the danger behind it, grimaced and whimpered. With a single quick stealth move, Ren swiftly felled the monster, sending it sprawling onto the lush grass. Will rushed over to Ren, calling out loudly, "Master, that move." He didn't explain in detail, only replied in a low voice something like that. "A good teacher can also learn from his own student, though I only just came up with it myself." Will and Marie beamed and praised repeatedly. He said, as expected of Master. Marie quickly added, "That's so cool." Ren untied Erica, regained his composure, then ordered, "All right, retreat while we still can." Will looked over with a somber expression. The monsters were still struggling with each other. He asked in a low voice, "With the master's strength, couldn't he sweep them all away?" Ren sighed helplessly and explained, "Idiot, I only put the orc to sleep. I'm a healer, even if it's a monster. I have no intention of harming it. When it wakes it will feel more comfortable, that's all." Will ran behind him, watching his back, a small smile forming at the corner of his mouth. Truly the master. We had broken the goblins' encirclement. After taking down a few pursuers, it seemed they gave up. The four stopped in an open spot. Ren said they could probably rest here for a while. Ren reached out and tried to heal Erica, softly calling, "Hey little one, wake up." She suddenly opened her eyes wide in surprise. Erica sat up. The first thing she asked was, "Where am I?" Marie immediately reassured her, "You're safe." Will put his hand over his heart respectfully and asked politely, "Sorry to ask right after you woke, but what happened? Why were you alone?" Erica showed a flash of panic, clutching her head and fearfully asking back, "Alone. Yesterday's campaign went very smoothly. I didn't hold everyone back. But whenever I let my guard down, something bad happens. This morning when I woke up, Professor Veronica was gone." Will suddenly repeated Professor Veronica's name. Erica recounted everything. She left a note saying to wait for orders but didn't say when she'd return, so I was very worried. While discussing with the other two, for some reason it ended up with me going to look for her. His face darkened as he looked at her suspiciously. She was persuaded by them and couldn't refuse, right? He thought. It's so like Erica, but this can't be taken lightly. One mistake could be fatal. None of us are prepared enough to face situations so different from class or drills. Erica didn't answer, only added worriedly that after entering the forest she smelled a sweet scent, and when she woke up it was already this time. Ren clutched his head in frustration and suddenly said that the goblins must have used a sleeping drug, the earlier trap and their cooperation with the orc. What on earth is happening? No, now is not the time to ponder that. Anyway, your base is nearby. Let's rendezvous with the other two. The four of them lined up and moved off immediately. Erica, walking in front, suddenly halted and lowered her voice. over here, wait. She looked up, a flash of panic crossing her face. Surveying the wreckage before her, she said flatly, the base has been destroyed. Marie suddenly spoke up. I've been looking into this beforehand. Goblins are highly territorial, meaning they normally won't leave their domain, so a base outside their territory should have been safe, yet it ended up like this. Why? Will pondered for a long time. Proactively attacking humans is also a trait of monsters that appear after the red moon. Currently it can't be explained. Ren crouched low to scout the surroundings and then spoke up. There's no sign of fighting. It seems the two of them ran off somewhere. We'll split up, I'll go look for those two. The three of you meet up with Turf and then leave the forest. Don't assume your base is safe, stay alert. An immediate reply came. Roger, understood. We hurried back to our base. Will shoved the door open and called out loudly, Turf, are you okay? Turf, who had been cooking, paused at the noise and replied, you're back. Lunch isn't finished yet. Marie finally exhaled in relief. Thank goodness you're safe. Turf, still unaware of what happened, asked what's going on. Will turned and walked away with Erica, calling back, we'll explain later. We have to leave now, right? For a moment he froze, eyes wide. Both of them were briefly stunned by the scene before them. He said in a low voice, it seems we're being watched. Erica gaped and shouted in alarm, what do we do? What should we do? Responding to that shock, Will said, I was just thinking how weak I've become. Erica paused, catching his meaning, and asked, you mean? He turned, a corner of his mouth lifting as he said softly, take it down, the three of us together. I believe we can win. The monsters still stood imposingly before them, resolute and terrifying. Will surveyed the monsters carefully. Facing this large pack, the three of us coordinating is a matter of survival. He reminded his teammates, Marie, don't charge in like you did earlier. Just use your strikes to support the vanguard. No sooner said than done. Will acted at once. Let the wood golem take the vanguard position. He kept issuing the best tactics. Erica, use fire to halt the goblins' advance. But Erica felt extremely insecure. Someone like me got captured so easily. Even so, Will smiled to encourage her. It's okay. Your fire will be very useful. Recognized, Erica couldn't help but be surprised. She was still worried and trying to regain her composure. Not wasting Will's confidence, Erica summoned all her strength to cast the fire spell. In an instant, the goblins were surrounded by flames. Fearing being burned alive, they began to retreat one by one. Erica shouted gleefully, I did it. But Will had no time to relax before noticing something odd. Good, now we won't be overwhelmed by a huge wave of goblins at once. From the flames a solid foot slowly stepped out. Its toned muscles made the fire recoil, an orc. It strode out proudly, deliberately challenging them. Will was a little surprised. It turned out to be on an entirely different level from the goblins. Thinking that, he ordered the wood golem to charge forward. At the same time, he directed Erica to coordinate. Erica, fire, she quickly responded, got it. The golem's body was wreathed in flames as it lunged at the orc. The fire spread to the orc's body, causing him to howl in pain. Seizing the opportunity, Will turned and called for help. Marie. Marie quickly seized the moment, I got it. She swung her sword with force, knocking him into the air. He tumbled and sprawled onto the ground. Marie happily high-fived Erica in celebration. Great teamwork. Will still didn't relax. The coordination was certainly good, but what gave him pause was that the orc kept getting back up. It seemed that wasn't enough. Will was clear-headed enough to recognize its power, regenerative ability. Marie began to worry. Do we have to keep doing this until it can no longer revive? Will didn't rush, he pondered. Does its regeneration have a limit? There's no guarantee we can defeat it by continuing like this. If we're going to finish it, we need a more certain method. But then Erica screamed in alarm, snapping him back to reality. Something's coming. Will stood alone against a powerful energy charging in. But when he slowly opened his eyes, before him was a blade. Indeed, a fiend was attacking him, the goblins. Looking further, the orc was holding them in its hands, ready to throw them. Will wasted no time sending the fiend to its death. Damn it, troublesome snipers. Erica keenly spotted another fiend diving down from above. They were appearing again. Marie charged up powerfully and gave one a kick that sent it flying. She seemed to have her own plan. I'll send them back where they came from. With that, Marie kicked the fiend far, far away. This is when she shows how reliable she is. Lord Will, you look like you've come up with a plan, so from here on let me handle it. Hearing that, Will acted with confidence. I'll rely on you. He placed full trust in his teammates, using Erica's and the wood golem's wide area attacks to hold back the large number of goblins. And Marie would strike back at the thrown weapons. With nothing left to worry about, Will charged into close combat with the orc. Now I just have to deal with this orc. It quickly registered his presence, but Will was a step faster and evaded the attack. From afar, the battlefield was a haze of smoke and dust. The orc's attacks kept missing. Instead, Will delivered a strike to its groin. This enraged it even more, teeth grinding fiercely. The orc roared in fury, the sound echoing through the forest. The wound to its chest that Will struck moments later quickly healed. Even the cut on its wrist rapidly regenerated, only to find that Will had somehow gotten behind it. You're exposed. He unleashed magic from right behind it. This is the finishing blow. Will didn't hesitate and used magic to defeat it in one strike, amplifying its life force. The orc's heart suddenly flinched with pain. Its whole body trembled as it moaned weakly. Its eyes rolled back and tears began to well up. The scene turned grisly, blood spraying everywhere. The outcome was obvious at a glance. Will broke into a triumphant smile. The battle ended, the orc collapsed on the grass. Finally, he could breathe easy by forcing the orc's regeneration to overwork. The surge of life energy makes its body explode. It can't regenerate from that blow. Then he turned and proudly declared that now the only thing left was to wipe out the remaining goblins. After his proclamation, one by one the monsters were sent to the eternal rest. Bodies strewn about in different places, heads turned aside lying on the ground. The final battle was over. Before them lay a battlefield piled with monster corpses. Will could now fully relax his body, given the situation. Erica, having fought hard, was exhausted. Only Marie remained full of energy, rushing over excitedly. We totally won, right? Will didn't spare praise for the girls. Everyone's coordination was excellent. Erica still seemed frightened, but thankfully we managed it. But Will remained worried. It wasn't over yet, others were still. At another location in the forest, a raging tornado was sweeping everything away. Will's group witnessed it and he immediately recognized it as Sirius. Thinking that Will led the way. If we move toward that vortex, we should be able to rendezvous with the other teams. At the same time, Sirius was rebalancing his magic. Then a call made him look over. Sirius, are you okay? Seeing Will's group intact, Sirius relaxed, glad everyone is okay. Not far from them, someone was stepping on a pile of monsters and called out, "Hey." It was Bode. He looked puzzled. Something's off with this formation. Where are the professor and the others? At that moment, Ren appeared from who knows where and replied, "We're here." Seeing him, Will rushed over anxiously. "Master, we found 2 people." Ren explained, "Consider it done." Then a vortex rose, so we headed that way. He patted Will's shoulder with satisfaction. "Everyone did well. I trusted you and I'm glad no one was hurt." The group received the praise and all of them grinned from ear to ear. Bode interjected with a reminder. "The mood's like it's all over, but we're still missing someone." Hearing that, Will checked again. "Right, Professor Veronica." Bode was still uneasy. "I'm not overly worried about her, but we can't just withdraw without saying anything." Ren immediately proposed a plan. "We'll watch over the remaining students. Those who can fend for themselves should split up to search." He seemed to agree. "Yes, Sirius." Next assignment went to Will. "You two go search." The 2 men obeyed at once. "Yes, understood." A little later, Will set out to find the missing person. "I'll amplify my hearing to detect living presences." Suddenly, a sound rang in his ear, but he wasn't skilled enough to distinguish it, so he had to search manually. Following the direction of the sound, he saw Veronica's back. "Found you good." She seemed safe. Will quickly called out, "Professor Veronica." In her hand, she was holding a glowing red stone. Veronica heard the voice and slowly turned her head. The moment he saw it, Will's face darkened. The light. Could it be like the red moon? She quickly tucked the stone into her pocket. Veronica frowned and asked Will, "What are you doing here?" He hadn't quite pulled himself together. Then he recalled the main issue. "I'm looking for the professor." Monsters went berserk, so the field training probably ended. Strangely, she coldly brushed past him. "Is that so? Then let's return." Sensing something off, Will immediately called back. "Wait." He asked plainly, "What was that stone just now?" But Veronica dismissed it curtly. "It's nothing." Will pressed further. "You say it's nothing, but what have you been doing all this time?" Leaving the students to fend for themselves. The more he questioned, the more anxious he became. His body began to tremble. "Please answer me." Veronica froze at his words. She spoke in a low, murderous tone. "Sorry, but it seems I have no other choice." Veronica's eyes showed a clear threat. "It would be better if you kept quiet about this." Even Will didn't understand how things had come to this. But in the end, she turned and walked away without striking. "Don't worry, I won't do anything bad." After that, I couldn't say more to Professor Veronica. Even if I wanted to continue interrogating her, I lacked the ability. Moreover, I wasn't ready to suspect Professor Veronica, the teammate from my previous life, and thus the field training ended. The next day, since returning from the training, Will still carried a troubled mood. He barely slept last night. Does this mean Professor Veronica is connected to the crimson moon, the red moon, but in my past life? While thinking, he saw something ahead. Two people were exchanging something mysterious in front of the gate. The person wasn't anyone else but the one he had just thought of, Professor Veronica. He quickly temporarily suppressed his magic, hiding his aura. Will tucked himself into a corner against the wall, activated his eavesdropping ability. He couldn't be discovered. The man standing opposite Veronica asked in a low voice, "Yes, I've received your request to leave the academy. Where are you going?" But she only replied curtly, "Personal matters." Will's mind quickly made a deduction. Her personal matters outside the academy probably involved that red stone. Having thought that, he made up his mind. It seemed he had no choice but to tail her. Veronica left the academy shortly after. From behind, Will officially began to follow her. Will felt he was too hasty. He followed her without thinking. He kept pondering, and in the blink of an eye Veronica's figure was gone. If he's wrong, he'll really be a stalker. Memories from his past life flooded back. Will couldn't keep worrying about being misunderstood, especially with a chance to learn about that tragedy. He vowed to clear Veronica's name, but something unfamiliar made Will look around. After all, this is my first time returning here since my previous life. After I graduated from the Healing Academy, monsters ran rampant and I was dispatched to battlefields far and wide. I'm pretty sure I visited this town back then. As he thought, he stopped and looked at Veronica. If I remember correctly, it turned out she was just buying bread at a small bakery. A memory from his past life returned. Back then, Will was holding a loaf of bread in his hand. He looked at it, his heart warmed. Honey bread, huh? Without waiting, Will brought it to his mouth to taste it. This delicious delicacy made his eyes light up. "It's so good," Veronica agreed. "This place is famous." Will took the opportunity to find an excuse to talk more. "I grew up in the countryside, so I hardly ever buy food like this. You were born into a merchant family in the city, so you probably eat this often, right?" Veronica replied calmly, "That's right, but it's not entirely about my background. My rule is that whenever I see a bakery I have to stop in." This made Will more curious. A rule? Veronica stopped hiding and slowly recounted her life. From trading trips with her parents to growing up and charging into battlefields, I met many people. Her gaze suddenly held a strange thoughtfulness. "I almost never met them twice, and even if I did, they'd changed so much they seemed like different people." For that reason, Veronica set a rule for herself. "I don't want to regret if that happens, so I forbid myself from ever saying later." In that case, Will no longer needed to hold back. He blurted out, "So that's it? No wonder you always speak so bluntly. It scares people." The comment surprised her. "I didn't expect you'd think of me like that." But then, Veronica changed the subject. "Besides, I don't know when I'll die." Will didn't like that much. "Don't say such pessimistic things." But she flatly denied his words. "I'm not pessimistic or planning to die. I'm just living fully in the present." Suddenly her voice softened and she looked at him with expectation. "If so, will you protect me?" The Will from his past life didn't hesitate to accept. "All right, I promise." Returning to the present, the thought made his chest ache a little. He stood in the street tormenting himself. "In the end, I still let Veronica die. This time I swear I'll protect her." The more he thought, the more determined Will became, and to do that he needed to uncover the truth. With these very eyes, so Will trailed Veronica even more closely. She began to slip into a secluded corner behind the building. Seeing her standing before a large iron gate made Will even more suspicious. It looked shady no matter how he looked at it. He kept worrying inwardly. "Will she be okay, Veronica? I need to strengthen my presence hiding skill." After a while, Veronica stepped inside. Of course, Will couldn't help but follow. He hid in a corner and heard another voice. "We're waiting for her." A person cloaked in black stood before her. "Sorry to summon you to a place like this, but it's important." The person removed the hood and cloak to reveal purple. It was all Root. She wore a scheming expression. "Now about the item we discussed." Veronica remained silent, staring at her counterpart. After a moment she produced the red stone, astonishing Allroot. "This is." She quickly took the stone, but a moment later she frowned slightly. Allroot raised the stone joyfully. "Wonderful." Then she turned to flatter her. "You truly have talent." "Yes, of course, I always believed so." Perhaps Will began to overhear the information he wanted. "With this, our church's greatest wish." Allroot couldn't help revealing the plan. "We're one step closer to the red moon." Those words made Will's face go black. He immediately pieced the events together. Of course, this really ties into the red moon and that church too. Unlucky beyond measure, the concealment spell Will used began to expire. Veronica sensed something was wrong the next instant. Only then did he realize the situation. Damn, his presence-hiding skill had worn off. Without thinking, Veronica lunged at him with her sword. Will was defenseless now, eyes wide with fear. Frightened, he could only shout, "Professor Veronica." She trembled uncontrollably as she used her body to block him. "So you did follow me after all." The dragon before them grew increasingly ferocious. At that moment footsteps came from afar. "I told you, didn't I, that you must come alone?" Allroot held the stone, speaking regretfully. "I'm sad you broke our agreement. I truly thought our cult was about to gain a new member." Hearing that, Veronica coldly swung her sword in a slash. "Listen, this was unintended." That attitude made her quickly act conciliatory. "Oh my," I jumped to conclusions. "If so, just eliminate that witness and the cult will gladly welcome you." Will was startled by that remark. Veronica instead pointed her sword forward and replied bluntly, "I refuse. I came only to investigate." Allroot narrowed her eyes, sizing her up. "I have no intention of sacrificing my precious student." Seeing the tension, he hurriedly stood up. "Professor Veronica, I'm sorry, but I need to know what's happening." Veronica immediately turned back and cut in. "It's my fault for not explaining sooner. That day I sensed something unusual in the forest. What I found, there was a monster gone berserk." A cold gleam flashed in her eyes. Before her, beneath the grass, was a red stone. Veronica picked it up then, this stone, this feeling. She clenched her hand and poured a source of magic into it. When I channeled magic into it, it emitted a red light. At that moment, Allroot, as if having waited a long time, stepped forward. "I never expected to find a potential comrade in a place like this." She clasped her hands as if praying, "This must be the guidance of the higher-ups and proof of the mission entrusted to me." Seeing that, Veronica immediately grew wary. "Who are you?" Allroot smiled and closed the distance. "I would love to tell you many things, but we have rules." At that, she raised a finger and whispered a reminder. "If you want to learn about that stone and about us, there are 2 conditions." Before Veronica could speak, the other rattled on. "First, you must make it glow again to verify your eligibility. Second, you must tell no one and come alone to the designated place to prove your trustworthiness." Allroot put a hand to her chest apologetically. "I'm sorry to test you like this." Veronica's gaze never left her. "But I truly hope you will become one of our comrades." Back in the present, she flatly refused the offer. "Therefore, I plan to infiltrate it to investigate covertly." Recalling how I spoke to Will earlier, I thought I made it clear I wouldn't let anything happen. But she turned away coldly and left. "It's fine, I said I wouldn't let anything bad happen." He behind her trembled slightly at that. "That's not enough explanation," Veronica replied softly. "You're right, I'm sorry." Finally, Will exhaled. "But I'm just relieved you're not a bad person, Professor Veronica." Allroot across from them interjected slowly. "So you're wanting to join the cult was a lie. I'm even more disappointed now." As soon as she finished speaking, she dropped the stone from her hand. The water surface rang with a sound, her voice full of regret. "I didn't expect I'd have to eliminate such a talented person." Immediately, Will sensed something amiss. "The stone you received from Professor Veronica, you threw it into the water." The stone suddenly flashed red. From the deep, the Octodorako began to awaken. Even the surrounding beasts seemed to be controlled by something. The water surged violently. From below, a multitude of beasts roared and rose up. Allroot quietly stepped back. She clapped and cried out excitedly, "Wonderful, such brutes who can bestow this raging power are rare even within the cult." Seeing the beasts before him left Will stunned. "See, dragon, it's this powerful." Veronica carefully counted, 1, 2, 3, 8 in total. Hearing that, he immediately interjected, "I'll handle half of them." She flatly refused and lunged forward. "No." Veronica gripped her sword tightly. "It's unnecessary." Magic emanated from the blade as Veronica spun and swung her sword. The magical sword storm struck. A series of sharp slashes from the blade flew straight at the sea dragon. Will was frozen solid by the sight. Truly worthy of Professor Veronica. At that moment, Veronica's eyes flashed with a cold glint. The body of one sea dragon collapsed to the ground. Seeing that, she sprang up and quickly dodged. Will ran over anxiously and asked, "Are you all right?" Veronica steadied her breath and replied, "I'm fine." Looking at the part of the body still writhing, she was momentarily shocked. No way, it took that full blow and it's still alive? No matter how strong its regeneration is, how could it not die instantly after being decapitated? New heads sprouted rapidly, terrifying the 2 of them, and it even regenerated from there. No healing magic could accomplish that. Will drew his dagger, preparing to fight. Something was wrong, could it be? A sea dragon suddenly lunged at him. It dove headfirst into the ground. Will quickly dodged. He spun and slashed with the dagger in his hand. The cut abruptly stopped at the creature's flesh. Will trembled as he tried to pull the blade out. this limp body, I knew it. He immediately wrapped his arms tightly around its body, so then he shouted a warning, Professor Veronica, I want to try something, please step back. Veronica said little and stepped back. She understood, but don't overdo it. Will used strength-enhancing power, releasing his limits. He called out, just a little force more. His feet dug into the ground. His fingers dug into the sea dragon's scale. Then Will heaved it up, revealing a giant octodorako. Get out here, come on, come on. Only then did Veronica fully see it, so that's what it was. She had thought it had been beheaded yet still alive. Seeing the octodorako before her gave her a chill. Turns out that wasn't a head but a leg. The colossal thing that had emerged was the soft-bodied monster octodorako. The familiar sound of footsteps reached them again, so you saw through the dragon's true form in the blink of an eye. Alroot put a hand to her chest and sighed. Marvelous, no, not marvelous at all. Then she loudly proclaimed, the cult isn't about combat prowess. If you can't eliminate these people here, it will be troublesome. After that, Alroot slowly produced an item. At this rate, I'll be defying the cult. The mysterious cult member Alroot drew out a staff and declared, therefore I, Alroot, will take the liberty of handling this matter myself. Will seem to have planned ahead. Professor Veronica, can you take care of that monster for me? Recalling her earlier techniques, he explained that her magic sword would deal with that soft body more effectively than his method. Veronica still looked uneasy. She agreed, but she couldn't let her student be in danger. Will suddenly grabbed her hand. The source of power from his body flowed quickly through, boosting her physical strength. When done, he smiled and said, once I take it down, I'll come right back. Veronica was stunned by the instruction. From now until then, be careful, okay? The corner of her mouth twitched. She murmured that she had a bold student indeed. After that, Veronica took her sword and stepped forward. Fine, but you must be careful about one thing. She turned back and whispered something small. That one is probably. Will's eyes widened in astonishment. No way. Hearing that, Veronica reminded him that he had proven it wasn't impossible. He understood and immediately dashed off. I got it. Alroot remained calmly standing there, quick indeed. The corner of her mouth curled into a triumphant smile. Then I shall also. At that moment, Will prepared to swing his dagger. Alroot easily blocked the attack immediately. He felt a momentary shock inside. She blocked it. Seeing him wildly slashing, Alroot showed excitement. It seems you also have great talent. Her gaze suddenly flicked to the side. After that, the two temporarily halted their attacks. Alroot touched the cut on her face. She had grazed it. Her finger lightly traced the fresh blood. That must hurt so. A stream of power flowed from her fingertip, allowing me to heal myself, okay? At that moment, Veronica stepped forward. That stone has a passive mana current flowing through it with the same wavelength as offensive magic. You used the opposite method, but in other words, she is. Seeing the wound slowly heal, she immediately realized, like you, a combat-capable healer. That information left Will momentarily stunned. Combat using healing magic, how did he come up with that? Alroot raised her head and explained, of course not, how could I have thought of such a thing? The staff in her hand glowed, yet even someone like me. Alroot waved her hand to one side and the ground immediately exploded. This too can be done thanks to the cult's doctrines. Will's eyes fixed on the staff. So it has existed since then, the combat methods for healers. Remembering how he once blamed himself for not fighting personally, Will trembled as he gripped the dagger's hilt. How far have they truly advanced? In front of him, Alroot continued. On that point, it seems you had innate talent from the start. I'm rather jealous. Thinking of a mysterious person. She chuckled through her teeth. I would very much like you to meet him. Saying this, Alroot excitedly asked, what do you think? Are you interested in the cult? Will angrily cut in, you must be joking. He clenched his fist and said softly, I will never become your ally. Will's eyes suddenly flashed red, not even in another life. A streak of light flashed before Alroot's eyes. Energy began to surge from her body. What a pity. No sooner had she finished speaking than she sprang forward. Alroot swung her staff, a crooked smile on her lips. Then in the end I must destroy you. Will grit his teeth and absorb the sudden blow. He trembled as he withstood the opponent's powerful strike. With physical enhancement active, its force is quite strong. Will thought of their mysterious demeanor and the red stone from before the heresy. The bodies and energies of the two were in opposing states. His pupils flared. Healing magic and offensive magic. There's so much he doesn't understand. Alroot in front of him still wanted to fight wildly, but he only needed to interrogate her about everything. He gritted his teeth and used his strength to shove the opponent away. The sudden surge of power helped Will fling her away. Then maybe he could avoid that tragedy. Taking the opportunity, he quickly spun around. Will launched a kick straight into Alroot's body. She was unexpectedly counterattacked and sent flying backward. Instead, she curled her lip in an excited smile. At this rate it looks like I might lose. At that moment Allroot suddenly raised her staff high, but I have the cult backing me. The red stone immediately flared with light, enhancing physical strength. Allroot's pupils instantly turned red. One of her arms swelled to enormous size, this power. Veins began to bulge along her cheekbone. Her body was transformed, yet Allroot screamed in delight. Wonderful. Will had already felt something was wrong. This clearly surpassed ordinary physical enhancements from healing magic, and he shouted, "Who taught you that kind of magic?" Upon hearing this, Allroot respectfully placed a hand to her chest. It's all thanks to the cult's instruction. Recalling that moment, she stood dazed among the crowd. Until then I lived recklessly, caring for nothing. Allroot fumbled to heal herself amid curses. I was hired by a magic team as a healer and simply followed the orders of some arrogant man. Those days were tedious. She laughed self-mockingly and added, "If you were a healer too, one day you'll understand." Her words made him think of the Alps crowd, that this world is full of people undeserving of salvation. The red stone was then handed to her. The cult granted me power and enlightenment. The more she spoke, the more excited Allroot became. From then on my life began to shine. Will gripped his dagger tightly and retorted, "I don't know what you've realized, but what you're doing is wrong." Then he could not help shouting, "At this rate many people will die." Allroot waved her hand to block the attack, remaining calm. "Still, it's fine." As she closed in, she whispered, "Because the cult says it's right." Immediately after, Allroot swung and sent him flying toward the wall. Will spat a mouthful of blood. She then approached step by step, mocking that justice has prevailed. Will bowed his head in silence, not responding to such emptiness. Memories of loved ones, his master, Veronica, and so many others who had died at her hands, flashed through his mind. Will ground his teeth in unwillingness. Seeing this, Allroot's expression momentarily froze. He hugged his injured arm and slowly rose, surprising her. "You can still stand." Allroot's eyes widened in horror, but with so many injuries, energy began to gather around his arm. The wounds on it healed instantly. Allroot couldn't help but ask, "Did you heal that wound instantly? What kind of restorative power is that?" Will clutched his head and said in a low voice, "I will not forgive you." He pushed his hair aside to reveal sharp eyes. "I will make you pay with pain worse than death." Seeing this, Allroot angrily charged, "This time I'll destroy you outright so you won't have a chance to recover." Will swung his fist with terrifying force. The overwhelming power made the entire space tremble. Allroot for a moment could not withstand that strike. A corner of his mouth curled as Will taunted, "That's all and you're already screaming." He spun and threw his fist again. "I'm not done with you yet." Allroot's eyes widened, fear plain to see, too fast. Instantly, she took a punch from him. Bright red blood gushed from her nose and mouth. Allroot was knocked meters away by the blow. Afterward, she lay motionless on the ground. Seeing that, Will slowly walked over. "Passed out already, we'll finish this later." Only then did he suddenly remember. "Ah, right, Miss Veronica." Before them, Veronica was fighting Octodorako. Her eyes flashed with a cold light. With a single swing of her sword, she cut off one of the beast's tentacle. A powerful energy radiated out. Veronica slowly sheathed her sword. Immediately after, the severed flesh fell to the ground in pieces. She smiled and looked over at him. "Done over there too." Veronica glanced off into the distance and added, "That one has high regeneration, so it took a bit longer." Will understood inwardly, so the monster was a tougher opponent after all. No wonder it's Veronica. He slowly turned his head. So then, they both approached. Will lightly tapped Allroot's face. As soon as she opened her eyes, she met Will's bright smile. "Now spill everything." Will pressed Allroot down forcefully, causing her pain. Before she could recover, a sharp blade was held to her throat. About to be buried but still stubborn, "Don't pull that scary face." Will replied coldly, "That depends on you." He bluntly interrogated, "I have a lot of questions. What is the cult? What are its goals?" Allroot answered vaguely, "A believer must not reveal information to outsiders." To his surprise, she suddenly grabbed the knife. Then she began spouting mad words. "Always dedicate your life to the cult." After that, she went insane and slit her own throat. Long live the cult. Her suicide stunned Will. He couldn't believe his eyes. Allroot's eyes rolled after the pain she just endured. Even in the afterlife, she carried an obsession. "I end my life to protect the cult's secrets. A perfect believer, with this my soul will be led to the world Lord Claudio's desires." When departing, Allroot still wore a satisfied smile. But suddenly Allroot slowly woke up. Her mind felt oddly clear. She couldn't even die in peace. "This is, my wound is gone." Allroot grew ever more puzzled. She had clearly stabbed her own throat. The cold blade cutting her throat and the hot blood that gushed out were real. Unexpectedly, Will also insisted she had killed herself. "I'm surprised you offed yourself. I underestimated your faith." He laughed provocatively, "But I've already healed you." Allroot couldn't believe it, repeatedly denying it. That's impossible, I should have died almost immediately. Will didn't hesitate to explain. Almost means not immediately, I can heal it. Allroot refused to accept it. That would be impossible for an ordinary healer. Having said that, he made his point. I'm not ordinary, I'll become the best healer in the world. Will continued the interrogation. Do you realize, if I can heal someone on the brink of death, that means I can torture you up to the edge of death? Hearing that, Allroot fell silent. Realizing the gravity, panic slowly crept into her eyes. Will pressed his advantage, smiling with malice. Well, are you ready to talk? Fear showed plainly on Allroot's face. No way, at this rate I have no choice but to reveal it. But the next moment, her pupils contracted as if hypnotized. She was pulled into a mysterious space, constantly hearing a whisper in her ear, "Die for it." Allroot's face showed outright terror. Suddenly tears streamed down her face. Will's expression immediately changed as well. Allroot trembled in agony, her eyes rolling back. Veronica quickly sensed something was wrong. "Step back, Will, something's not right." Will quickly released her and stepped back. In the blink of an eye, her head and limbs evaporated. Those standing nearby gaped in shock. Looking closely at the ground, Allroot had become a dried corpse. Will sprinted over. "What?" He immediately began treating her. "Wait, don't die." Seeing his efforts, Veronica could only feel helpless. "It's useless." Will stopped and analyzed. Her life force vanished in an instant, some kind of curse and an extremely powerful one. Will still had many questions. Who was behind this person? Veronica then asked him, "Will, are you okay?" Will replied with some regret, "I'm fine, but this guy." Then he felt guilty. This was an opportunity to extract information. "It's my fault for letting you come. Sorry." But she was magnanimous and didn't hold it against him. "As long as the students are safe, that's enough." Veronica smiled gently and said, "Let's return to the academy." On the way back, Will kept muttering, "The red stone was destroyed. In the end, we learned nothing." Veronica remained calm and explained in turn. "The cult and the red stone make monsters violent. Just knowing these things exist is a gain. You can't guard against things you don't even know exist." Of course, he had similar suspicions. She was right. Compared to his past life, he was definitely making progress. At this rate, surely. Even so, Will still had too many unresolved questions. But taking advantage of the moment, Veronica confided, "I'm actually very glad I joined the field training." She revealed another secret. "I insisted on joining the field training because I was worried about you. Our school is the only one with 2 teachers accompanying, isn't it?" At last, some of Will's doubts were partially resolved. "So that's it. Veronica only discovered the existence of that thing in this life." He continued to ask, "I've always wanted to ask, how did you come up with using static mana to attack?" Veronica answered honestly, she came from a merchant family. Perhaps she had more opportunities to come into contact with both healers and battle mages. But his thinking was a bit different. "If it only took that to come up with it, then I feel magical research should have advanced much more." Veronica was equally surprised. "Really, then I don't know either." Suddenly Veronica remembered something important. She vaguely sensed a familiarity. She felt as if someone had told her something similar when she was a child. While Will was still pondering, they had reached the bakery. Could that person be connected to the cult? Veronica wanted to pop in again. "Will, let's put these complicated things aside for now. Do you want to buy some bread?" Will's soul felt pulled back by the question. He nodded cheerfully and agreed at once. "Yes, ma'am." And so the great mysteries remained. "I have gained new power to avoid annihilation. I was scolded for going out without permission." Elsewhere in a room, the atmosphere was strangely silent. Ulp sat properly at the table but seemed dead. There was a snakebite mark on his neck. At that moment, another voice rang out. "That industrious one is dead, and now it has come to me." The girl carried the snake with her, constantly saying, "Yes, I will do it, I will do it." She held the red stone in her hand, staring at it entranced, as if it were an order from the cult. A few days had passed since the battle with the sect. At this time, Will and Veronica were sparring. He kept asking about the previous information. Did she find anything on the sect? She quickly replied, "Not much. They call themselves a sect, but it seems they show no notable activity." Will expressed regret. "I wish I could go down to town to gather information." She showed her rigidity. "Students need permission to leave the school." Veronica reiterated that a student's duty is to study. Will smiled confidently, "I know, but I hate sitting idle, so I came up with an idea." As he spoke, he suddenly put all his weight onto the tops of his feet. Then he accelerated and evaded Veronica's strike. Before she knew it, Will had closed in from behind. "I plan to seek out Master Shedarl, a leading expert on monsters." What seemed easy turned out to be easily blocked by Veronica. "So that's it. you plan to use an extracurricular program, but she stuck to her view. I'm pretty sure you need excellent theory scores to register. As she spoke, she slashed with her sword, forcing Will to struggle to defend. Are you qualified? He confidently flicked her back. Don't worry about it. Will began to boast. This time my theory score ranked first in the whole class. Hearing this, Veronica sheathed her sword and breathed a sigh of relief. Having an outstanding student like you makes me proud, and you've become more reliable too. But he still recognized he needed limits. I still have a lot of work to do, but I've begun to realize how much you've held back, and that's good. Just then Veronica offered a reward. Then it's time for you to choose your core. He was still blank. Core what? She explained seriously. You have the creativity to flexibly turn healing magic into attacks, but if you find a specialty and hone it, your fighting style will become stable, and the variety of your options will shine even. But Will answered thoughtlessly, then I'll choose Professor Veronica. Veronica reiterated the point, what I can teach you is swordcraft magic. Are you truly okay with that? There's no need to rush your decision. She quickly suggested, for now we should go see Master Shedarl. Will finally understood, I see. After that he began his journey. He had arranged to meet Master Shedarl, and the weather was beautiful despite being far from town. This trip turned out even better than he had hoped, a perfect day for field study. The field study program allows students to learn from experts outside the academy. At Schwarz, we often visit mages active on the front lines, but we can also experience the most advanced academic field. Shedarl was a famous monster researcher even in my previous life. His achievements were so great the kingdom awarded him a medal. The more Will thought, the more he admired him, truly a scholar of monsters, living far from settlements. But his nature was more curious than that, wondering whether the man had ever been attacked by monsters. Suddenly Will sensed danger and looked up. From above, a cascade of large boulders was falling like a waterfall. Will quickly brought his mind back to the present. There were dangers like this here too. He ran at full speed and dodged each boulder. But suddenly one boulder seemed to target him, hurtling straight toward him. Will quickly concentrated all his mana into his palms. Then he sliced several times, cleaving the rock into many small pieces. Afterwards he calmly regained his composure. But it seemed not over yet. He continued to sense something speeding toward him. It was a dart. Will successfully caught it. He examined it carefully, a star-shaped arrowhead, and at that moment two others approached. Sorry. The black-haired one gave an unconvincing excuse. Just an empty monster trap misfired. Will didn't want to bother with petty men and intended to leave. An empty trap? I nearly died, do you know that? But the black-haired guy kept taunting. You're still alive, aren't you? The blonde youth sounded more polite. We're hunters here. People don't usually pass through here. We'll be more careful next time. Will sighed in annoyance and moved on. Just learn from it. I hope you won't do that again. We're in a hurry, so please don't. But it turned out to be a facade. The blonde began to reveal his petty nature. I've learned my lesson. The two planned to play dirty, ganging up on Will. Next time we'll teach you properly. But he calmly bent down, evading their attack. Then he glanced over and observed carefully. Seeing the situation favorable, he kicked the two, sending them plummeting down the cliff. The two hardy youths clung to the cliff, trying to hold on. Will looked at them with contempt. The bracelets and rings didn't fit them at all. Without thinking much, he casually remarked, obviously stolen. Will's voice suddenly grew cold as he stepped toward them. Funny, you know, I've been thinking lately about whether there's an effective way to reform bad people. As he clamped the blonde's mouth, he came up with a new idea. Will looked at them, bristling with murderous intent. What about brainwashing? The blonde's whole body began to tremble. The black-haired one, still worried but mouthy, butted in, stop. Will declared flatly and tossed him to the ground. I'm not stopping. His smile now was enough to scare the black-haired one. Not stopping, I already gave you a chance. Then he turned back and clamped his hand over the man's mouth. The black-haired man's whole body began to shake. More importantly, something alive seemed to be trapped in the bag the two were carrying.